Good evening, everybody. We'll start the public meeting. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors, December 13th, 2018. And would the Secretary please take the roll?
Directors Gunther.
Here.
Akbari. Here. Huang.
Here.
Weed.
Here.
And Sethy.
Here. And why don't I ask Colleen, why don't you do us the favor of leading us in the salute as our guest tonight? Ms. Colleen Haley.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this point we have two re-elected directors that will take their oath of office for the next four-year term, myself and Director Huang, and I would like to ask Director Huang to go forward first in having the oath of office read to her. Okay, so we are going to play a little bit of musical chairs with our agenda tonight in order to accommodate our guests here. But first we're going to start off with public comments. Would anybody like to come forward from the public? Seeing none, I will close public comments. And we will move on to our special presentation for this evening, the District of Distinction Award from the, what is it?
It's a Special District
Special
Leadership
District
Foundation.
Leadership Foundation, California Special Districts Association.
So I do have some formal talking points here for you today for each of our awards, and then after they're both handed out all together. Actually, I should say there's 4 altogether because there's multiple versions of the one you earned, and you earned at the highest level, so that that earns you another plaque on top of that. But after the end, I'd like to request to the board that you gather maybe behind the flag or behind the board members' pictures there, and we take a formal picture, both for our Facebook page, and I understand you're going to be sending out a press release as well. So for those reasons, I hope we can do that after I finish. The first presentation, I'm going to be talking about our Special District in Governance honorees tonight. Both, though, are through the Special District Leadership Foundation. So just to give you a quick snapshot of the foundation, it's a 501c3 not-for-profit dedicated to promoting excellence in special districts through recognition programs that highlight and focus on implementation best practices. And there's 4 altogether. There's 2 for individuals, and the 2 for individuals are the Special District Administrator Certificate for high-level staff. And then the second one for individuals is the Recognition in Special District Governance, which we're handing out tonight for board members and trustees. And then the 2 for the districts as a whole are the District of Distinction, which you earned here tonight, and the District Transparency Certificate of Excellence, which you, of course, have already received twice before. So in continuing on, the Recognition in Special District Governance is a program that was designed to honor special district board members and trustees, and it consists of 2 main parts. The completion of the Special District Leadership Academy, which includes 4 courses altogether: the Governance Foundations course, Setting Direction Community Leadership course, Board Roles in Human Resources course, and Board Roles in Finance and Fiscal Accountability course. It also requires 10 hours of continuing education received from the California Special Districts Association and or any other statewide association specializing in local government. So why do you ask, is all this important? Because the recognition is an opportunity for board members and trustees to demonstrate to their constituents and fellow directors the extent of their commitment and dedication, providing the best service possible to those they serve. And we'll put off the presentation for after the second set of talking points, which is for the District of Distinction Award. The accreditation is designed as a way for districts, I'm sorry, I should go back. So the presentation of the Special District Governance Certificate is for 2 members here tonight. It's for Paul Sethy and Jim Gunther. And then we'll go back and do the presentation right after. Now, the District of Distinction Award is accreditation, which is designed as a way for districts to highlight their prudent fiscal practices, along with other areas of importance, including effectively operating and governing special districts. The District of Distinction program enables districts to demonstrate their commitment to their communities, media, the legislators, and stakeholders, in their commitment to operate in a sound, responsible manner that they truly stands them out as a district that's gone above and beyond. And this accreditation requires clean financial audits for a minimum of 3 consecutive years, proof that the district has essential policy and procedures in place. All directors and designated staff have completed comprehensive training in governance and all the laws pertaining to districts as public agencies. And why is this important? Because it demonstrates understanding of respect for their responsibilities and inherent in providing essential public services, shows that the district has clean audits and operates a fiscally responsible way, places the emphasis on education within the district, and focuses on having sound policies in the areas of governance, board conduct, district finances, transparency, and reserves. Additionally, on top of all that, this is the highest level recognition in district governance. To receive this level, a district has incorporated completion of all special district leadership foundations demonstrate a comprehensive approach to excellence in district operations and governance, and every director has received recognition in special district governance, and your general manager as well has received certification. Therefore, on behalf of the Board of Staff of the Special District Leadership Foundation, it's my pleasure to present Alameda County Water District the District of Distinction Platinum Level Accreditation, a recognition of your commitment to good governance and to the ethical and sound operations. Congratulations. Additionally, as I mentioned, we have the 2 separate individual awards for board members. So also, on behalf of the Special District Leadership Foundation, it's my pleasure to present the Recognition and Special District Governance Certificate to Paul Sethy and Jim Gunther in recognition of your commitment and dedication to providing the best possible community service to the community you serve. Thank you very much. And we have altogether 4 of these to pass out. So you've got the District of Distinction plaque. Next we have, this is a platinum level distinction.
Maybe I should come down, or we should.
You, yeah.
Jim, why don't we go down together? That's your individual one.
The whole board together, is that possible?
Sure.
Yeah. We'll do that. Why don't we come down here and we'll have...
Do a photo op.
Is there anyone that would like to hold these were the ones that is district-wide? Okay. And then we have one more at the platinum level.
Pretty cool.
I've never had to present so many at once before.
You are a distinctive group.
Ready? Go. Okay. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. Sorry about that. Let me get another. So just lastly, thank you very much. It's a pleasure representing the California Special Districts Association. We're, very glad to have you as members. Once again, my name is Colleen Haley. Please let me know if you need anything in the future. I'm sure I'll be back for more awards.
So if I may, President Sethy. Okay.
Quick remark here. So, just to point out for the benefit of the public and our employees, there are many special districts in the state of California. Well over, somewhere near 1,000, right?
Over.
2,000. And the Alameda County Water District this evening in receiving this District of Distinction Award is only the 6th special district government agency in California to achieve such certification. And I think that speaks volumes to all the hard work of staff, the way we manage our finances, and the conduct of our board. So thank you very much, Colleen, for coming here this evening. All right.
Thank you. We'll put this in a safe place. Okay, so...
We're next on the consent calendar?
Yeah, the consent calendar would be the next thing.
Okay, so under the consent calendar, I'd like to recommend to the board that items 5.3 through 5.7 plus 5.10 be added to the consent calendar. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Take the vote.
Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Huang.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. And would somebody like to make a recommendation as to consent calendar as amended?
I'll make the motion to, as amended.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second.
Vote?
Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari. Huang.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. So we will take item 6.3.1, our state legislative report from Ron Davis, next on the agenda. Ron, welcome.
Thank you very much. If I may, first of all, good evening, members of the board. Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to present my annual report to the Board of Directors at Alameda County Water District. It's always a pleasure. It's been my pleasure to represent you now for about 6 or 7 years, and I always love coming here to see a lot of good, friendly, smart faces. It's always a joy to work with your wonderful staff, your general manager, and so it's been a real pleasure. And so I have a brief report, but if I may, I'd like to just take a quick diversion to commend Mr. Warren on how well he did on the presentation of the oath. I'm reminded of a gentleman by the name of Willie Brown, who, when he was swearing in members of the Assembly, if you were a member of the Democratic Party, it was presented much like Mr. Warren just did, with care and thought. And if you were a member of the Republican Party, it was read to you as rapidly as humanly possible, and you were expected to keep up with it. So it was very interesting watching him swear in members of the legislatures.
I appreciate your kind words.
So 2018 ended up being a very interesting legislative session. Every year we start with, water's going to slow down. It's not going to be this big of an issue. But once again, it seems to be mounting every year, and the policy issues that come before the legislature seem to be growing with respect to water. So just real quickly, we had some major water use efficiency bills passed early in the year. Those are going to be going into effect over the next few years in a kind of a rolling method, so you'll be tracking those and implementing those also. We've also seen a new bill, SB 998, pass this year that will modify the way and put you all water agencies in basically a statewide process for terminating service for failure to pay bills. It's a very fascinating bill. All the testimony supporting the bill was all about bad landlords. Had nothing to do, no complaint about the way water agencies were actually terminating service, but yet water agencies were the ones who ended up having to deal with this issue. So you'll be dealing with a new set of rules with respect to termination of water service. The other very fascinating thing that happened this year, thanks to the wonderful economy that we've had, is that in 2018, we're now in the middle of the largest budget ever adopted by the California legislature. Last year, they adopted the largest budget prior to that, and the economy was doing so well when Governor Brown introduced his budget on January 10 of earlier this year for fiscal year 18-19. He started where last year's budget already was, and in the May revise it added, which was $180 billion on the state side. That did not include the federal funding that came in as well for health and welfare issues primarily. So this year they had ended up adopting a budget that was just a few cents shy of $200 billion. So it's one of the largest budgets they've ever approved. So the lovely thing is it looks like you're going to have about a $15 billion budget surplus this year. So you'll find out more when next month, January 7th, the new governor will be sworn in, Governor Newsom. So as a result of that, he then has literally 3 days to introduce his first budget on January 10th, so they're, needless to say, already working on that. Newsom has started adding staff for his transition team, hired a few more people today. I read about on my, after I got here, I didn't read about it on my drive. But he hasn't appointed anybody really on water issues, although he has a pretty good idea who those folks are. I won't say it yet because he hasn't made that formal yet, but they will be people of high quality and folks who have, in one instance, a person who was part of the Brown administration. Your general manager was kind enough to entertain my idea of introducing the idea of, or the next section I'm going to talk to you about, which is the election. He was going to let me play a few bars of the 1962 Safari song Wipeout. I just couldn't figure out how to do it. But I do appreciate his openness and willingness to let me do that. The November election was quite fascinating, and finally actually concluded about a week ago. As a result, you're seeing a substantial increase in Democratic representation at the congressional level. California's delegation is 53 members. There were 14 Republicans out of that 53 in the last Congress. When the next Congress is sworn in, there will be 7. The Democrats went after 7 seats, and they won every one of those seats, including turning Orange County from all Republicans to all Democrats. So it's been quite a fascinating change. I'm going to miss out on working with not only a supermajority in both houses of the California legislature, but I don't know what, I guess you could call it a mega majority. A supermajority is a 2/3 vote controlling votes in both houses or either house. They have literally, in the Assembly, it's mathematically a 3/4 vote advantage over the Republicans. And if you round up on the Senate side, it's also a 3/4 majority on the Senate side. I've never seen those numbers before myself, especially in the Senate. With Mr. Newsom's election as governor, when he's sworn in January 7th, it'll be the first time since 1880s that you've had a Democrat replacing a Democrat in the gubernatorial office. The other thing, you know, and it continues, every statewide office is held by a Democrat. And in many of those cases, it was because of the new rules on the top 2 vote getters. Many of the statewide offices had 2 Democrats running against each other. And in one instance, it was a Democrat running against a declined estate, which is, I think, the first time we've seen somebody without party affiliation get into the final 2 for an election, serving in my memory. Going forward, I think Mr. Newsom has a very ambitious plan for what he intends to do. He does say he's going to hold the line on the budget, but yet he has a very shall we say, expensive-looking outline for the things he's particularly interested in. So like I say, he'll be sworn in on January 7th, introduce his first budget on January 10th. And while he says he's going to follow Governor Brown's lead on holding the line on budget, he is also, in his campaign, he has campaigned in favor of universal health care. He has campaigned for universal early education. He has also he's pursuing a plan for the next generation to have universal education from elementary school all the way through college. He has a Marshall Plan, as he refers to it, for homelessness and housing costs. He also has a middle-class workforce strategy in mind. He has a master plan for aging and dignity. I'm particularly interested in that. And then what we do know is that he's not a particularly big fan of the high-speed rail. And I could only find one written reference on his interest with the California water fix. I've got a lot of anecdotal information about his interest in that. So I had a conversation with a former state senator from the Delta. Actually, she wasn't speaking to me. She was speaking to in-Delta folks. And I happened to be walking by, and she was a little embarrassed when she looked up and saw me and heard what, and knew that I had heard what she had said. But she did tell her crowd that her goal was to just hold off on the water fix until Brown was out, because Newsom had promised her that he would stop the water fix. But in the written interview that he had with the LA Times, he didn't go that far. He did say that he was concerned that the twin tunnels would be subject to lawsuits forever and ever. So he would prefer a more moderate approach of a single tunnel. That's all I can find in terms of his interest in the California water fix. Obviously, he's going to be very close to the environmental community. He's very interested in climate change, so he's going to have a very ambitious, he likes to refer to as big, hairy goals. So he's going to have big ideas. The interesting thing is he's kind of referred to along the lines of another Jerry Brown, in that he's got a lot of big ideas, but he's not real big on the details. That was one of Jerry Brown, especially Jerry Brown 1.0. He was never real interested in details. course, he wasn't real interested in being governor the first time either. He was always running for something else. Ran for president twice, Senate once. Didn't win those seats, but he did manage to cover a lot of ground. So those are a few things that we dealt with this year. So with that, I will wrap up my comments, but again, I want to thank the board, your wonderful staff, for all the opportunity I've had to work here. I was reviewing some things that we've accomplished. We did get the Alameda County Water District named as the Sigma for your Niles Cone District. We got some nice language drafted by your fantastic General Counsel protecting your MOU in the underground storage program that protects your relationship and your ability to protect your Niles Cone groundwater basin and your relationship with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. To the best of my knowledge, the only agency in the state of California that has statutory protection. Congratulations. Good work. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
We can roll into the next item if you'd like.
Which is?
Recognition of Ron.
Right, so,
Okay, would you like me to cover it?
yes, please.
Okay. Ron, please don't sit down yet. I got something else
Got
for you.
something for you. We do.
So, members of the board, Ron Davis is retiring after more than 7 years of service as legislative consultant to the Alameda County Water District, and more significantly, over 36 years of service representing water interests in California. Ron has served as the district's representative since March 2011. During his tenure, he has actively monitored, represented, and testified on behalf of the district on California legislation and state budget actions in Sacramento. He has provided regular updates to the district's board and committees, and has worked closely with both staff and board members on a number of critical legislative issues during his service to the district, and Ron mentioned a few of those. It's interesting that Ron didn't mention is most recently Ron actively advocated and we successfully stopped a proposed state water tax on drinking water that would have impacted ACWD's customers significantly. So the staff recommendation is that by motion adopt a resolution honoring Ron Davis and expressing appreciation for his many years of dedicated service to the district and water community. And I just might add that continuing service might extend for just another couple of months or so because district staff is actively seeking proposals and interviewing potential lobbyists that would kind of carry the flag for ACWD in Sacramento. And Ron has been nice enough to kind of keep his finger on the pulse while we do that.
Thank you.
As board president, I would like to make the recommendation that we approve staff's recommendation in honoring Ron Davis with the retirement resolution that we have here. And so I look for a second here, if I may.
I'll
This is
second
item
that.
5.8. Second from Director Weed.
Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Huang.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. So Ron, let me come down here. Look forward to seeing you around for many years to come. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
it
all
very
your
much.
service.
Thank you.
My honor, appreciate it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Safe drive back to Sacramento.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move to item 5.9 on the agenda, which is presentation of a retirement resolution for our longtime employee, Patty McMahon.
And Stephen Inn will be covering this item for us.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Patricia Ann McMahon, we all know as Patty, will retire from the Alameda County Water District on December 27, 2018, after more than 35 years of service with the district. Patty actually started working at the district on August 25th, 1980, in two different temporary positions. First as a work experience education student, and then an engineering clerk trainee. Patty then started her professional career with the district on July 11th, 1983, as an engineering aide in the Groundwater Resources Division. She was promoted to Engineering Technician 1 on July 1st, 1985, Engineering Technician 2 on July 1st, 1989, and then Engineering Technician 3 on March 4th, 2013, which is her current position. Patty has been with the district her entire work life and is currently the district's longest tenured employee, and that's not even counting the 3 years she did as a temporary employee. Patty's primary duties with the district involve assistance in the administration of well ordnance programs, coordination and processing of applications for drilling permits, scheduling of drilling contractors, assignment of state well numbers, and inspection of drilling work associated with wells and geotechnical and chemical investigations. Patty also coordinates the well investigation program where district records are reviewed in order to identify active or abandoned wells that may be impacted by proposed development activities. Patty has played a key role throughout the years as a leader to her team. Other staff in groundwater resources and throughout the district have benefited by her exceptional customer service, training, and guidance. Patty has consistently performed her duties with a high level of competence, integrity, and dedication, and I might add, with a cheerful attitude. She will be greatly missed by her many colleagues and friends at the district. Staff recommendation is by motion adopt a resolution honoring Patricia Ann McMahon and expressing appreciation for her 35 years of dedicated service to the district.
So, Patty, we have a very nice plaque for you too, and if you'd like to come up and make any remarks, please feel welcome. Don't be embarrassed.
To say. The 38 and a half years that I have has been great. I actually started in the old building on Fremont Boulevard, and I might have already told you, Paul, but I sat across from your dad.
Yes, you did.
So back in the day, yeah.
You have some good old stories to share.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of changes through the years, but it's just been the greatest place to work. And it's not just the work, but it's the people, and that's what chokes me up, because it's my family. And this choking up is because it is the best place to work. And the board, Bob, Stephen was one of my supervisors. Michelle Myers back there was one of my supervisors. Kit is my current supervisor, and I just thank everybody. I mean, honestly, this whole district, it's just been the greatest place. And the board, you should be really proud, because this is really the best place and the best people working here. So yeah, thank you.
Patty, my father started in the early 60s, and you're one of the few remaining employees that actually overlapped his career when he retired in the 1980s.
I think so. So yeah.
So I think we need to pass our resolution first, and then I will come down and present you with this, okay?
Okay.
So do I have a recommendation on approving item 5.9?
I'd like to make the motion, McMahon's, and your husband, was with our district for another 26 years, so a total over 60 years with your family with our district. So if I would like the honor of making that motion, if I might.
I'd love to second that.
Take a vote.
Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari. Aye. Huang.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. And this one does say Patricia.
Yes, it does. We don't want them leaving with the wrong resolution.
Here you go, Paul.
I feel very honored to present this award to you.
Getting a workout today.
Yeah.
We're up to 511.
Mm-hmm. for me, it's a little bit emotional too, Patty. I just want to say that. So we wish you well. All right, we'll move on to another retirement resolution. We're losing too many good people here. So item 5.11 is our special honor to Stephen Inn.
Thank you, President Sethy. Stephen Inn will be retiring on December 21st. Actually, he'll be at work, until December 21st, but his official retirement date is December 31st, after 30 years of service with Alameda County Water District. Stephen joined the Alameda County Water District as an assistant engineer on August 31st, 1988. He was subsequently promoted to associate engineer in 1990, groundwater resources supervisor in 1994, groundwater resources manager in 1996, and manager of the Water Resources Department in 2014. And my recollection is Stephen was originally hired by Jill Durig, is that correct, at the district. So over the years, Stephen and his team helped the district to successfully establish state law, the ACWD Groundwater Protection Act, efficiently managed the Niles Cone groundwater basin, assisted with the implementation of the Newark desalination facility, worked with East Bay Municipal Utilities District on the Bayside groundwater project to protect ACWD's interests, assisted with the Alameda Creek Fisheries Program, and successfully addressed hundreds of contamination and cleanup sites. Stephen's team is currently navigating the challenges of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and acting proactively to protect the district's interests in the Alameda Creek watershed. He's also working on the Water Fix project in his spare time. Stephen's contributions have fostered partnerships with other local, state, and federal agencies and enhanced the reputation of the district throughout the state. Stephen has helped to ensure that the district continues its long and successful record of providing a reliable supply of high-quality water to the cities of Fremont, Newark, Union City, and a very small portion of the city of Hayward. Stephen consistently performed his duties with a high level of competence and integrity, and he will be greatly missed by his many friends and colleagues at the district. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution honoring Stephen Inn and expressing appreciation for his 30 years of service to the district.
Would a director like to move that motion?
I would love to move the motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed?
Aye.
And Sethy?
Aye. And Stephen, would you like to say a few words, and I'll come down and present you with a nice plaque.
I'd be happy to say a few words. First of all, I just want to acknowledge my wife is in the audience, Pansy, sitting in the back there, who's here to help me celebrate in this moment. And thank her for all her support and love through the years. It's been my honor to serve as the very first manager of water resources. To be honest, it was the biggest challenge of my career, and it's been exciting, though, to implement the general manager's creation of a new water resources department and to be on the front line of all the statewide water issues. It's also been my honor and privilege to work with all of you as directors and to get to know you better. Through all the time that we spent together, I've been in a good position to witness how seriously you take your roles as elected officials and as representatives of the community we serve. The hard work you put into preparing for these board meetings, committee meetings, workshops, and I can see the passion you have to provide a reliable supply of high-quality water at a reasonable price for our customers. The training that we all participated in to just receive that district distinction award, it provided me with an additional perspective that helped me appreciate your roles even more. In the very first session, I remember they said, you have to think about your board of directors as being like an arranged marriage. And to be honest, I never had that thought in my head before. And so that was kind of a revelation. And as they explained it, you ran as individuals with your own values and ideals as you came to the board. You didn't have a choice on who your fellow board members would be. And now you're being asked to work together as a board. So I know that's not always easy for you, and I just want to say that we do appreciate the board working together. I've also enjoyed working alongside the staff sitting beside me, in front of me, and legal counsel as well, don't leave Pat out, because they've been here at every meeting, and they are a very high-performance team, and they're always looking out for what's in the best interest of the entire district. I want to also recognize all of our support staff that you don't see on a regular basis. Some are here in the audience tonight. Since they are the individuals in the field and in the office, and they're making sure that the district meets its mission on a daily basis. I'm very proud to be associated with these groups of dedicated, hardworking, and results-driven coworkers, and I will miss them all very much. Get my composure. Finally, I need to say something about our general manager. Bob Shaver has been my supervisor for about half of my career here at the district. And I've been able to watch him make the transition first as the engineering department manager and then as the general manager. Bob met the challenge with each promotion, and I've greatly admired his leadership skills, his ability to quickly grasp complex issues, and to make the tough decisions. We are led by a general manager who is completely engaged on all issues facing the district, and I'd like to thank him publicly for being a great boss and a leader. And if you don't mind me suggesting, you might want to keep him around as long as possible. So in closing, it's been a wonderful career, and I will greatly miss working at the district. However, if you adopt item 5.12, I can delay saying goodbye to everybody for a little bit longer. Thank you.
We'll take that up.
So, Director
So,
Sethy, may I
yes.
make a comment?
Yes, board comments.
So, most people know that I ended up on the board because of Jeff Miller and restoration of steelhead in Alameda Creek. Little do they know that Stephen Yin actually has a hand in it. So if any of the staff think that I am difficult to deal with, you could blame him. So as the story goes, Stephen, you probably did not remember, when we first met, you came to visit the regional board, and I was a lowly engineer. At that time, I was contemplating applying for being on the board, and I talked to a few of the senior managers that had the opportunity to work with you and with Alameda County Water District. And the first thing they said was, you know what, that Stephen Yin is really smart. They know what they're doing, so this is a great water district. You should run for the board position. So it's pretty incredible how well you represented the district, even that many years ago. It is amazing the reputation Alameda County Water District had with the board when I was back at the board, precisely because of your dedication, the fact that we are honest, we are clear, and we are committed to restore our groundwater basin, and that came through you, and I truly appreciate it. Later on, you represented us ably and tremendously as part of Sigma negotiation. I have to say, for a while, I was under the impression that you either live in your car or in Sacramento, because whenever I ask Bob where you are, either you are on your way to Sacramento or you're in Sacramento. So it is pretty amazing how much time you spent on our behalf, and thank you to your family for lending you to us, because that is definitely not easy. Your job is not just being in this office, your job is actually all over the place representing us. I truly appreciate that. I appreciate all the advice you gave me when I first came on board. I would definitely miss you. Hang around some more and don't tempt me not to approve item 512.
Any other board comments?
Thanks, Stephen, for his service to the district and the many days on the road. Thank you.
Yeah, I second Director Weed's comment about many days on the road. Yes, it seemed like, where's Stephen? He's in Sacramento. Where is he? Sacramento. Sacramento. Thank you, Stephen. I've always really appreciated working with you here, and you're going to be missed. I'll be supporting item 512. So just letting you know that. That's the only way I'm supporting this member.
Director Akbari?
If I may, Stephen, it's been a pleasure to work with you over the past couple of years, and I really appreciate the work that you've put to get me caught up as well as a new board member, and you're definitely leaving some big shoes to fill. So thank you for your service.
Likewise, Stephen, when I started on the board, you were one of my real tutors in bringing me up to speed. Even though I'd grown up with the water district, you kind of taught me all the finer points of what goes on in the water industry, water resources. And I'm going to miss you. I hope you will continue at some level of consulting work with the district. And I appreciate your help in helping me up in Sacramento when I've had to represent the district too. A lot of folks in this room don't know that Stephen In and Michael Yee and I all attended Cal at the same time some years back. Go Cal, go Bears, right? So I'm a little jealous on one hand that you're both retiring, but I'm very happy I was reelected and get to continue here on the board. So I'm wishing both of you well here. And it will always be Go Bears, right? That's right. Laura, you have divided loyalties, Cal and Stanford. So, all right, so I'm going to come down and give the presentation of this resolution to Stephen. Take some more pictures. Okay, at this time we will move on to item 5.12, and I will turn it over to the General Manager.
Thank you, President Sethy. This item involves a resolution for exception to the 100-day wait period certifying the appointment of a retired annuitant to limited-term critically needed position. The district recently conducted a recruitment to fill the Manager of Water Resources position, and that's been the topic of the day, which will be vacated by Stephen In when he separates from the district on December 31st. The selected internal candidate will assume the Manager of Water Resources position on December 17th. And that young lady is sitting right there. Because of the critical role that Mr. In has served as the district's representative with the state water contractors in California water fix-related governance, design, construction, and financing activities, and in complying with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, staff recommends hiring Mr. In to continue performing this work for a limited duration to continue representing the district's interests, as well as assist Ms. Haitis to get up to speed. Accordingly, staff is planning to hire Mr. In as a retired annuitant from January 2nd, 2019 to as late as July 2nd, 2019 on an as-needed basis. Mr. In will be paid within the established salary range for the Manager of Water Resources, but at the hourly rate identified in the resolution. Because staff plans to rehire Mr. In on January 2nd, 2019, which is prior to the end of the 180-day wait period required by statute, a board resolution is necessary to certify the appointment of a retired annuitant to a limited-term critically needed position. Because there are vacant positions, there is adequate funding in the budget for this expenditure. So the recommendation is by motion, approve the resolution for exception to the 180-day wait period certifying the appointment of Stephen In, a retired annuitant, to a limited-term critically needed position performing special work associated with the district's role in the State Water Contractors California Water Fix Project and Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And of course, I'm happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Any board questions or comments?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. Okay, and
Just, you may want to check if there's any comments from the public.
are there any comments from the public?
Okay.
So we will go back to the main part of our agenda, which is two items on water rates. Item 5.13.
I think we probably
Oh.
want to cover 5.1 and 5.2.
Oh, did we?
We can do it in any order you'd like.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I stepped out of order here.
That's been the theme of the night, out of
Yeah.
order.
Thank you for correcting me here. Okay, so we will go back up to the beginning of our action calendar, 5.1, reorganization of the Board of Directors. Thank you, everybody.
So, California Water Code Section 30520 provides that the directors shall, 1, elect one of their number president, and 2, may elect one of their number vice president. Pursuant to Section 2.2 of the Alameda County Water District Board Rules and Code of Conduct, and Resolution 1871, which was adopted on December 10, 1970, this election is typically held at the first regular meeting in December each year. Directors who are elected president and vice president assume office at the close of the meeting at which they are elected. And I should also add that customarily, the ACWD board rotates its board officers, and I previously emailed the appropriate historical information to the directors. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt resolutions electing 1, a president, and 2, vice president of the board.
Are we open for a motion?
Yeah, I will entertain a motion for president of the board.
I'd like
this
to
time.
nominate Mr. Jim Gunther as president of the board.
I will second. Second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Okay, and I would like to put into nomination Director Huang for vice president of the board for the next term.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. So I will be handing over this historic gavel from back at the 1914 or something, from the district's founding, to Mr. Gunther at the end of the meeting.
The end of the meeting.
End of the meeting. I'll do quick. All right, so we'll move on to item 5.2, the adoption of the 2019 calendar of regular board meetings and board workshops.
So Section 7.2 of the Alameda County Water District Board Rules and Code of Conduct, or we call them the board rules, state that regular board meetings are generally held on the second Thursday of each month at the hour of 6:00 p.m., with the exception of the April meeting, which will be held on the second Tuesday of each April. In addition, staff is planning to conduct several board workshops with the board, which will be held at 4 p.m., and our special board meetings pursuant to Section 7.3 and 7.5 of the board rules. Regular and special board meetings are open to the public. In order to provide advance notice to the public and to allow board members and staff to plan their annual schedules, staff is proposing the attached schedule of its regular board meetings and board workshops for board adoption. And now that I know who the board president will be next year, I will work with the board president to subsequently populate the calendar with the committee meeting dates. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt the proposed 2019 calendar of regular board meetings and board workshops of the Board of Directors.
Okay, I'd like to move it with comment that, so I'll put it on the table to make a motion to adopt the calendar as proposed.
I will second. I have a question as to when the committee assignments will be out. When do we expect that?
So, staff has been working proactively with directors on availability for various committees and various schedules. So I'm looking for the district secretary, who's not in the room, but I think working with Director Gunther, we should have something draft ready to go within a week or two.
All right. And my comment, if I might, is I would like to thank the staff for scheduling the May meeting for the first Thursday. I had traditionally been on the third Thursday where I had a conflict with the BOSCA meeting. Thank you.
I will make sure that the district secretary receives your input.
We had a a motion and a second. Can we take the vote?
Sure. Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed?
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. The reason I expressed interest in when committees would be meeting is because, as you know, I have some other board obligations that I need to meet, and I'm trying to organize my calendar, and I'd also like to fit in some vacation here and there. Yeah, believe it or not. So we will move on to item 5.13 on the proposed water-related rates and charges and setting a public hearing.
Thank you, President Sethy. John Wunderlich, our manager of finance, will begin reviewing this item for us.
Right. While I'm providing some introductory remarks, Mr. Warren has copies of the presentation to distribute. So good evening, members of the board and public. The district conducted 6 public financial workshops during 2018 covering the topics of development fees, water rates and charges, proposed new water shortage emergency stage rates, and the district budget. Items 5.13 and 5.14 of this evening's agenda present the results of these workshops and will be presented together. Following my introductory remarks, Sanjay Gar of Raftalis Financial Consultants will provide a presentation.
Tony.
Michael Yee from the district will follow Sanjay with a brief presentation on proposed changes to miscellaneous fees and charges, which were reviewed with the Finance Committee in November, and the next steps in the rates process. I also want to recognize that we have Pat Cicedo and Dennis Martin here from the Bay Area Building Industry Authority. The board may wish to pause after the development fees section of the presentation this evening to hear comments that they have prepared to make. District staff has been working with the BIA to address questions and concerns that they have raised, and although the work with BIA is ongoing, our request of the board this evening is to still go ahead and set the public hearing for February 7th related to development charges, and we will continue to work with the BIA during the intervening period. So with that kind of overview, next I'd like to talk a little bit about the main topics we covered over the course of this year's workshops. The board deliberated on a wide range of issues, but some of the really major topics that would represent changes to our current approach include, 1, introduction of an equity buy-in component to the district's development fees to reflect the value new customers receive from the existing system. 2, the board deliberated on changes to the district's rate structure, including tiered rates, or changing the ratio of revenue recovery between fixed and variable charges. And the third really major item that I noted from the year's discussions was including water shortage emergency stage rates as part of the district's rate structure to strengthen the district's revenue stability during times of water shortage emergencies, such as a drought. The topic of water shortage emergency stage rates is included this evening as part of the water rates and charges item. Based on the discussions during the workshops, tonight's staff recommendation includes an equity buy-in component for our development fees and water shortage emergency stage rates as part of our new water rate structure. But there are no proposed rate structure adjustments to implement tiered rates or adjust the ratio of fixed to variable charges. Of course, there were many other items discussed and will be covered briefly in this evening's presentation, but those were what I felt were the major issues that could represent significant changes to our current policies that we reviewed this year. And so with that introduction, I will turn it over to Sanjay for this evening's presentation.
Mr. Wunderlich, just a process check. Are we covering both 5.13 and 5.14 at the same time here?
Yes.
In this presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the first section you'll see covers the development charges. And once we conclude that section, you may wish to pause so our representatives from the BIA can make some comments.
Okay, and then we will take two separate votes on public hearings.
Yes, and so that's the exact recommendation to set those public hearings and authorize distribution of the Prop 218 notices will be covered at the end of the presentation.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you. It's always good to be back here. It's always good to be back here. So President, Board, public, I'd like to make our presentation associated with the rates, financial plan, development charge, and the stage rates. We have a lot to cover today. We're going to be covering the financial plan timeline schedule, briefly go over that, talk about the development charge. As Jonathan mentioned, we're recommending to take a little break after that so we can get public input about the development charges. Then we'll come back, talk about the financial plan, proposed rates and charges, talk about stage rates, the process of how the board would consider them, why we need them, and what they are. After that, Michael Yee will be talking about help on tap, miscellaneous charges, rates, and then the next steps. So, as mentioned, we've had 6 meetings. We started in February, and now we've had 6 meetings since then. Today we're on December 13th, where we're looking at potentially setting the public hearing associated with the development charge and rates. If the board desires, we would then have a public hearing anticipated on February 7th associated with that. They would be effective for the water rates if desired by the board on March 1st for the rates, and the development charge if desired by the board would be on May 1st. So we're going to talk about first, as mentioned, the facility connection charge. This, as we recall, is the one-time charge for development to pay for the infrastructure that they benefit from being in place by your current users, and also incremental infrastructure that is needed. So since the last time we presented this, numbers have changed. We've done another round of due diligence, and the equity buy-in portion actually got reduced because of that round of quality control. And then also the ratio between single-family and multifamily also has changed. And because of those, the fee now, the proposed fee is $8,235. It was $10,544. So it is a significant drop since the last time. Now, comparison-wise, as you can see over here, the green is your current, the purple is the proposed. Given the scaling here, because of some of your neighboring communities, how large their fees are, so it's hard to see the difference there. But as you can see, these fees are all over the map, and there's a lot of reasons why. From my understanding, with Zone 7, they had issued a lot of debt associated with growth-related, so that's the reason why their fees are larger. I understand. But they all are over the map. Some agencies or cities also have a policy of making sure this fee is not that large, so that they induce growth in their communities. So there's a lot of factors in playing out in why the fees are all over the map. We are recommending that we phase in this fee. So the proposal that we're suggesting would be fully in place in 2023. The current is $6,862. We're phasing in the equity buy-in component associated with that. This is in current dollars. We are recommending that these fees will be annually adjusted based on some kind of index, ENR index most likely. The one thing to note is that the fee basically increased from now to 2019 is $275. That is the recommendation that we are suggesting, if you look at the difference between those two numbers. Single family, and also, as I mentioned, multifamily, the EMU was 0.8, 0.6, 0.8, thank you. But now it's 0.84 based on recent analysis that has been conducted by the district staff. Next is the non-residential commercial, and what they would pay, and it would be based on meter size. We're recommending based on AWWA capacity ratios associated with the meters. We have the equity buy-in, the incremental, the total. Similar to single family, we are recommending that we phase that in over time. So the total phase-in would happen in fiscal year 2023. Again, these fees would be indexed, so they're in today's dollars, so as inflation occurs in the future, they'll be adjusted to those nominal amount. As you can see, for the 3/4 inch meter, it is basically going up by $400 or so. So again, it's from my perspective, a modest increase. We are recommending, as I mentioned earlier, that we do kind of an index associated with this, and we're looking at the San Francisco Bay Area Index, the ENR associated with that. And so we would be looking at those numbers and adjusting the fee accordingly as each year occurs. Now, one new change that we are recommending is that the facility reimbursement charge be eliminated. So that fee right now is $461. As you may recall, I said that the fee is increasing by $275, but with the reduction of this, actually our recommendation for next fiscal year is a reduction in this fee in total. So the fee would be dropped for this first fiscal year. Of course, the fee would increase in the consequent years. Staff has also looked at the meter installation charge, did some time analysis associated with that, and there's a slight increase associated with that. So with that, I suggest we pause and maybe get comments if that's the board desires, and then we can have a discussion on this. Is there any questions?
Let's first see if there's any public input at this point, and then we'll come back to the board. Any public input right now or questions? I love your tie.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's kind of a nice evening. You've had a lot of lovely staff that you've been able to celebrate this evening. It's been nice to sit here and be part of that. It's always good to see.
Oh.
So I am Pat Sacedo, and I'm here on behalf of BIA Bay Area, and would like to comment regarding the development portion of the presentation made to you this evening. You know, BIA Bay Area has been in meetings, contact, communications with your staff over these past number of months in regards to the rate charges that are coming before you and the new development charges that potentially are being recommended to you to go forward. We're extremely pleased and appreciate the staff's interaction with us, particularly Mr. Wunderlich, who has really worked very hard to try and provide information as we've gone down this road. You know, BIA we also have our consultant and our counsel that have been reviewing the documents, and I think beginning right about Thanksgiving, we started getting a lot of data from your staff in response to some of our requests for additional data to look at, you know, how these fees are being composed, how your methodologies that are now possibly changing and what's going into the thinking in regarding to the two methodologies, the equity buy-in methodology and the incremental methodology that your consultant and your staff are bringing to you. As we look over the next month, we've not been able to get all of the information and the detailed download that we've been asking for to date, and we do recognize that staff is working on that and is planning to bring that information to us. But I did want to let the board know that we plan to continue working in good faith and in communication with your staff to give you an idea of just a couple of the items that we've been asking for and that we are still waiting under your equity buy-in. We have things like the full vetting and breakdown of the district's existing water infrastructure and what they call excess capacity, descriptive details of the district's asset list. So it's kind of specific information that we're asking for under both of your methodologies that you're reviewing and you're considering. I know under the incremental, we'd like to see clarification and data regarding the percentage allocation between the current and the future users for each project included in the incremental capital improvement program, and the projected average water demand in gallons per day for new developments with 5/8 inch meters. We also had several other items that we still are working on, and we have communicated that to your staff with our consultant. We've put it in writing, so it's pretty clear what we still need to see. And I just wanted you to know that we do, as I said earlier, plan to continue working with your staff, working in good faith, and we will communicate. As I say, our consultant, DFA consultants, they're economic consultants for the building industry, and our council are reviewing. We plan to provide continued feedback, and I know tonight you're planning to set a date for hearing, and we plan to stay the course and work with you, and hopefully our outstanding concerns and our outstanding, one of our clear concerns has been the concern that between your two methodologies, there may be some overlap in how you are assessing the fees and the charges. So we want to make sure that there's no overlap between those two methodologies and how fees and charges and how the rates will be assigned and paid for and who will be responsible for them. So we look forward to that continued dialogue. We wanted to be here this evening. We wanted to acknowledge your staff and their hard work and just say that BIA is working real hard too to come to some conclusions. Thank you.
May I ask you a quick question,
Sure.
please? There might be one from another board member here, too. Do you work on a regular basis with all the water agencies around the Bay Area on reviewing this type of...
By regular, do you mean ongoing, daily, or... When we have our builder members, when you see a water district that's looking through a process for making major changes, as you're looking at methodology changes, we will engage and we will work with those agencies as well, yes.
Okay. I was just trying to get a clearer picture of who you work with around the Bay Area.
Actually, we work with any agency that impacts the development community, the home building community. It's through our members, and if they feel or have concerns that, as we all know, housing, we're in a housing crisis. As we all know, development is very expensive. So I think the pencil today is really watching to make sure that the home building industry, the development community, pays its fair share. But they want to ensure that they're paying their fair share and not paying the cost that should be assigned to other users or the others being provided a particular service.
I see. Thank you very much for that input. Any other questions from the board or comments?
I have a rhetorical comment. We had an initial proposal to create a hybrid rate, which I believe might well have made it very difficult to separate out the two philosophies, which are independent, and put them together. So it's my understanding that currently the rate proposal is to continue to list them as separate elements and then give you the total combined as it is phased in over time. So our board has been seeking to make sure you had a level of transparency in our rate structure.
And we appreciate that. And I think therein lies the key, particularly with our consultant and our council, is making sure that there's no overlap. I know that you have a capital improvement program, and we'd like to see the specifics. We also want to be sure that that the fees that are being charged are directly related to what and how that capital improvement program, particularly under your incremental, will be implemented over the next 25 to 35 years.
Okay.
All right.
So if there's no further questions from the board, we'll resume with the presentation.
Very good. Thank you for taking me out of order.
Another public comment, please.
Members of the board, I was actually not planning to make a comment, but since I'm here for other reasons, I felt remiss that if I didn't make a comment about this. So I've spent the last few minutes reviewing these proposals on the FCC. And they, you know, on the face of it, I understand what you're trying to do. My question and comment relate to the ratio that you have allocated between single-family and multifamily, which I understand to have been recently adjusted to 0.84. The verbiage underneath that indicates that that ratio of 0.84 is based on the fact that multifamily units use 84% as much water as single-family residents in peak months. And that, I can see the rationale behind that. However, I believe that the intent of separating out the equity buy-in component from the incremental cost is, again, the following on the philosophy of fixed charges versus variable charges. That is, the equity buy-in is, as what's made in the presentation, sort of the value of tying into the existing system, e.g. the first drop, the value of having that first drop delivered from Alameda County Water District. I believe that the equity value of being able to receive that first drop should be allocated equally amongst all the development. That is, rather than applying the ratio of 0.84 to both the equity buy-in component and the incremental cost component, apply a ratio of 1.0 to whatever you finally allocate for equity buy-in, representing the value of the first drop, and then allocate prorate the incremental cost component, which represents the value of the capacity, and that, I believe, does scale to the peak demand. If you were to do that, the combined rate for the MFR would shift from 0.84 to 0.9072. Thank you.
Mr. Guard, would you like to resume here unless there's comment?
I have a question, but it's best to bring it up. The point. In recent years, we've been requesting the sub-metering of large projects as part of the approval rate. And since that is internal, it does not reflect it in this rate structure, the facility connection charges, etc. But it strikes me that, and this is not the night to resolve the problem, but I want to raise it because it's something that we have you here and the people. That as we go into situations, the homeowners associations, which are given a large bill and have a number of owner-occupied units, which don't pay individual water rates. We have apartments. The cities are now removing the number of units or density and just saying they're only going to use floor area ratio and cram as many little units as you can into a project, each of which may be sub-metered. Might we find some mechanism to acknowledge that and then even build, potentially, we may someday need to monitor it. The new legislation is for water consumption is going down is directed by 2030 to be 50 gallons per day per person. And where you have one individual in a large unit or a few which are out of compliance or they have a mechanical problem within their unit. Currently, for many of these units, we don't have that ability, and we'll be retrofitting, I suspect, in the future. So I would encourage us as we look at these rate structures to look at that request and see if we keep our overall rate structure in conformance with the realities of the real estate development market and the type of metering we'll be doing in the future.
Yeah, and just a clarification. So for for residential, like for multifamily, it's a charge per unit. So
right.
So I think it addresses your concern.
Possibly, but in the sense that I would see us even providing a service to some of the larger developments to say, okay, we will help you monitor the amount of water being used by each of your individuals, and then you can either subcharge it out, put the service charge versus the commodity charge in appropriate alignment, which we've got a ways to go, and maybe we'll get there. So throwing that out as something that as we develop these rate structures to see if there's if we're really are compatible.
Okay.
We've heard some good thoughts from everybody, so I'm going to ask you to keep on track here.
Okay.
This is a long presentation.
Yes, it is. So, so we're good with to go on to the financial plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go to the financial plan. So with the financial plan, we used a flat demand of 34 million gallons per day. That takes into account an 8% non-revenue water. The June 2018 board adopted CIP with revisions associated with the reclamation is included. The amended fiscal year 2018-19 budget is also included. We inflated the budget based on 3%. So capital improvement plan is not inflated. There is a debt issuance associated with the advanced metering infrastructure. $29 million is the total capital improvement plan. 50% of that is assumed for debt.
I would ask, is the $29 million, I heard a figure as high as $60 million at the last workshop.
No, so two options were presented by staff depending on whether we build our own fixed network or if we go with the cellular option where we're not building a fixed network. So the version that's included in the financial planning model is based on the cellular, and that was to be financially conservative over the next 20 years because the net present value per the staff analysis was slightly lower over the 20 years on that version.
I need to add something in here too. I need to make an apology to the staff and the board, and it was pointed out to me after the meeting that I was using the wrong number in the presentation to figure out what I thought would be the additional cost to implementing AMI. So if I was intending to add about $6 million to the base numbers that we had, and was in error in talking about numbers that were up near $55–60 million.
For if we use a fixed network.
Fixed or cellular, you know, I would revise the number down from what I had to 35 to 40 million. That's just my number.
Okay. So something over time longer, but for this rate structure, we're not looking at spending all that money in that time frame.
Here we're talking about 29 million. I was in error. I should have been talking more about 35 to 40.
But let me understand this. The 29 million, my understanding is we're not going to be, in what time frame would we even be looking at spending that 29 million? We still have to go through an entire implementation process, put in the network before we really go into the major expense, which is the meters.
No, so the 29 million was the total capital cost estimate for the project, which included the cost of the like the transponders as well as any meters that would need to be replaced. So it was the total capital cost that would be spent over approximately the next 4 years,
Right.
3 to 4 years.
So when I see a $29 million charge here, there seems to be, if that is, we're looking at a 2-year time frame, correct?
We're looking at 2 years of rate adoption. The financial model goes out much more than that.
Right. The charts we're going to show this evening go through the fiscal year 24-25, and so the full capital expenditure of the proposed AMI project is included in those numbers.
Okay. And I would note on the 8% non-revenue water, depending on the type of meter chosen, since most of that non-revenue water is on the customer side of the meter, that if we go with ultrasonic, we drop that to 3%, not 8%.
Yeah. So that'll be better for you because then you'll collect more revenue.
Okay. And we're not to the, whether this is the point in time or not, on the adjustment of the ratio of fixed versus
That'll be the next section.
Be the next slide. All right. Thank you.
So and also we current policy associated with the state water project and the new residential fire policy is being implemented. There are also some capital projects associated with Vacaros. Hopefully I pronounced that correct. 0.23 million, 230,000 in fiscal year 19, $1 million in fiscal year 20, and then another 2 million, and then 3 million, and then 4 million after that. The Cal Water Fix ramping is included of $1 million in fiscal year 20 to 9.5 in fiscal year 32. All the rates are funded. We also are doing advanced funding associated with OPEB at a 15-year at 6.5, and basically 14 of the 15 is to go, ending at fiscal year 32. This also includes the equity buy-in portion, slow implementation associated with that. The financial plan that we're presenting to you includes 2 4% increases, which is what the board is considering right now, and then after that, a 3% increase following that.
Well, first I want to go back one quick point. On the state water project tax override, and Director Sethy has been in the financing meetings more than I, that's looking at the current state water project allocations that we're budgeting. We're billing 67% on the property tax and the rest of it on rates. So that's the ratio you're speaking of on the current policy. And then when might we expect additional costs to come in on the state California Water Fix?
Right. So the financial plan as proposed this evening is that for the baseline state water project costs, we would continue the same ratio on the override tax, which is about 67%, as you noted. But for water fix, our recommendation is to collect it all on rates until we get through the validation actions. Once all of the legal processes are complete, which could be many years, then at that point we may come back to the board to talk about if we want to recover water fix costs in the same manner as all of our other state water project costs. But kind of consistent with what all the other agencies are doing at this part to be conservative and ensure there's no issues with collecting those funds, they're planning for it through their water rates.
Well, thank you. It's the first time I've heard of that strategy, and not disagreeing with it, but thank you.
And from a rates perspective, it is the conservative approach.
Yeah, because one of the legal issues will be the ability to bill it on the property tax.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, let's continue here.
So the estimated 4% increase, so the budget is shown on the left-hand side, where you see 28% of the budget associated with capital, almost 20%, 19% associated with water purchase, 10% with maintenance, and then the remaining is associated with labor and benefits. Where are the increases occurring? Predominantly the increases are occurring associated with the 4% that we're proposing is associated with capital project. Basically 70% is associated with that. The next major is operating and maintenance, then water purchase, and then last is 7%, which is labor and benefits.
Just stop here for one moment. We've had some members of the public say that we are not being entirely transparent on the labor, pension costs, healthcare costs, and everything. Is there a way to be a little bit more explicit here in how we're showing the data so that we kind of fulfill that requirement? And we're going to have a public hearing for this coming up. It might be prudent for us to take a look at how we can further break that out so people understand it.
So we do have a draft Prop 218 notice. What we chose to do in our Prop 218 notice is to show basically the complete picture in terms of revenue and costs. So what you're looking at here is a little different, because this is saying, all right, where is the additional increment of revenue that you're collecting because of this rate increase going? And certainly when we go out to the public, because this is a little harder to explain, we can provide more granularity to these charts and break down, pensions, OPEB, salaries.
Right. That's what I'm hoping we will do.
And what they will be on this, we have two ways of showing it. One way by cost centers, another way by cost elements. We will do that, and we will explain that in our public outreach. For the purpose of this evening's presentation, it's by cost centers, but we can show, like we have before, that their portion of capital cost is labor, because you need district employees to design and manage construction projects. So there's sub-slices of these. And then we've broken out charts before that just say, all right, here's labor and benefits on their own, regardless of where the money is being spent. So we will create those, and we will present them.
Great, thank you.
I can make a quick comment on this?
Yes.
First of all, on page 15, in my recollection, this is the first time we've had a breakout on the cost increase component, showing where the costs are going to go. It would appear that no more than 15% of this is going to be a variable or a commodity cost. At least 85% of that cost increase is related to the service charge. And yet, the proposed rate increase components are broken out almost in the opposite manner. It's one of the problems we have as a district. And we need to, I believe, start changing that if we're going to become responsible, not have to go into extra surcharges, et cetera, and go into these extraordinary swings in revenues. So we have some predictability. So my opposition later this evening will be focusing in great part on that at least the rate increase, where we have a clear documentation of what is a service charge and what is a commodity charge, should follow that breakdown, not the general breakdown, which is way out of whack and leading us to some very unfortunate results.
Mr. Garg.
Okay. So with the 4% increases, the 2, and 3% after that, and what we're showing you is the ending balance as a target. One thing that you will note is that the ending balance peaks in fiscal year 20, and then it drops down slightly to fiscal year 22, because we are using cash to fund significant capital improvement plans.
Let me add one more quick comment on that. That, based on our assumptions, my understanding is that if we were to have a net, to avoid a net operating loss, and with zero increase and a 2032 payoff of OPEB, we would need an 8% increase in our first year and a 4% increase in the following year.
Director Weed, can we hold off on that discussion,
Okay.
please?
All right, thank you.
I have some comments on that as well. So let's just try to get through the presentation.
Okay. So the top part shows the ending balance. The bottom part shows projected demand, as mentioned, that's flat. The next chart, 2 charts, shows the coverage ratio. As you can see, the dotted lines above the red, it's very healthy, so that's great. If you're going to issue more debt in the future, you have very great coverage ratio, so that's good if needed. And then the bottom is the capital expenditure associated with the financial plan. As I mentioned, in fiscal year 2021, you are spending there's a significant amount of money, and then it tapers down in fiscal year 23. In addition, we have 2 other charts as requested. The first one shows the operating revenue versus operating expense, which includes depreciation. As you can see, operating revenues are covering operating expense with depreciation. The next chart shows the rates and charges versus the revenue requirement, including debt service. As you can see, the rates and charges are not covering the revenue requirement, and that's because it doesn't include the other revenues coming in, such as your property tax and all the other sources of revenue that you have. If you take that into account, of course, you're covering all your costs.
So here, what is your definition of operating revenues? It's water sales plus everything else?
Operating revenues would be water sales and the...
Yeah, so our definition of operating revenues includes water sales is by far the biggest component. It also includes the connection charges, and I think a couple other small components. And then...
Property taxes?
No, property taxes would be considered a non-operating revenue.
Right.
And so the top chart, and these are charts we've used for quite a while, but the top chart is operating revenues, whereas the bottom chart is just water sales. So it does not include any other operating revenues or revenue sources.
Is it fair to say that property taxes were traditionally looked upon as a funding source for capital projects?
I don't know that I would say that. I think the way, in general, we approach our financial planning is we look at what's our total revenue requirement. You know, what are all of our costs, operating and non-operating. Subtract off all of our other revenues, aside from water sales, so property taxes, connection charges, interest revenues, grants, and reimbursements. And then we set our water rates to cover the remaining costs that are not covered by the other revenues is kind of the 30,000-foot view of how we would typically approach this. These charts here address specific metrics that I know the board has expressed some interest in seeing.
But the property taxes that we're speaking of is the ad valorem tax, which is a legacy from our agricultural days, when that was historically looked upon as an infrastructure cost. Yeah, thank you.
So this is the last chart of your financial section presentation. So it might be appropriate to have that discussion that Director Weed was bringing into focus here. what I wanted to point out to the board, and I'm going to make a request to staff, but let me make a preceding statement that I'm going to be supportive of staff's recommendation here this evening, and I don't want to delay on the public hearing. But after our last financial workshop, I went back to finance the next day, and I asked a question which I thought was very important for our board to understand at that workshop, but it was not presented. And it ties in with your top portion of the chart here, which is what was the necessary rate increase in order to have water sales cover operating expenses plus depreciation. And it turned out that was actually an 8%, 4% rate increase. That's what was really required in order to have water sales actually cover operating expenses plus depreciation and amortization. I wish that we would have had that extra bit of data put forward to the board in that workshop, because it's been a long-term goal of mine, I think our finance committee and then the board, that we were working toward that target over the last 10 years. And we accomplished it in the last fiscal year. We exceeded it a little bit. We look like we're on target to meet it again in this fiscal year, but without doing an 8%, 4% rate increase, we actually will be shortchanging ourselves from that target, unless we have a lot more revenue or we cut back on operating expenses. So in the future, when we have these workshops, I really would like to have that extra bit of information put forward to the board.
If I could add a little bit.
Yeah.
The number that Director Sethy is speaking of is shown as a net operating loss in our budgets. And for the first time in at least a dozen years, we're not showing a net operating loss. One of the problems of having a net operating loss, which at times can be significant, is they end up using capital funds to borrowed monies to cover maintenance and other operating expenses. It's noted here that we were using our property taxes to help make up that farm tax to make up some of those operating shortfalls. Not a good business practice, whether it be public or private. And hopefully we can have more responsible approach as we go along.
I will double up on your comments there. Okay, any other board comments, public comments? Please.
Well, I'll make a comment on the presentation as it's been made so far. And this is going to Director Sethy's comment about this graph. I find it highly misleading as well, because on the left, my interpretation, and correct me if I'm wrong, the left-hand pie chart, which represents the budget, this is your total budget of a little over $100 million, of which you represent 43% going to labor and revenue, labor and benefits. Now, in this presentation, you say you have a baked-in 3% COLA coming up. So if I take 3% and put that on 43%, that's 0.129%. Yeah, 1.29%. Right, so 1.29% of your total budget is an increase in your labor costs. Then I look at the right-hand pie chart, and this is my interpretation. This right-hand pie chart, this represents 4% of your budget. That whole pie chart represents your 4% increase that you're proposing. Okay. Now, 1.29%, which is the increase in your total budget, is 32% of 4%. That means this pie, this 7% slice that represents labor and benefits really should be 1/3, right? Because you need to increase your budget by 1.29% to cover your 3% COLA that you've already baked in. Yet you only represent here 7% of 4%, right, that's 0.28%. It doesn't make any sense. And I think I know what the answer is that baked into the other parts of the pie, right, there's labor necessary to carry out the capital project, right? But that's exactly the point I think you're getting at, Director Sethy, is that you've buried in here the 1.29% increase in the budget that's already earmarked towards labor and benefits. So I'll reserve the rest of my comments after the rest of the presentation, but I wanted to point that out because it resonates very much with the comments that Director Sethy made.
There are other,
Thank you, Mr.
There are other factors. If you would like staff to provide an explanation of that, we'd be happy
Yes.
to.
First of all, just thank you for your comments. Second, could we provide Mr. Nishimura with one of these?
Sure.
I think it might be helpful.
You can have mine.
All right. President Sethy, if
Yes,
you'd like, I
please.
could add some clarification. So what we're trying to do with these two charts is present two different ways of looking at how the 4% increase in revenue would be allocated. If you look at it in terms of just the increases needed to meet our overall revenue requirement, then you would think of it being allocated evenly across all of the elements of the budget. Except we excluded debt service from this because we've got to pay that even if we don't do a rate increase, right? So debt service was excluded. And so if you allocated that evenly under that kind of revenue requirement thought process, this is how it would be allocated. If you look just at how things were increasing year over year, most of it would be allocated to capital. There is no labor or benefits cost included in the other components. But what's happening because of some significant capital projects like AMI, fish ladders, the ongoing main renewal program, there's a large increase year over year in the capital program. And when you look at there's actually a slide on 17 that shows the CIP expenditures, and you can see from this fiscal year to next fiscal year about a $13 or $14 million increase just in the CIP. But we thought, actually to Mr. Nishimura's point, we thought only showing the cost increase component part might be thought of as misleading, and that's why we wanted to show the other approach too. And in terms of the 3% COLA and the other factors, again, this is labor and benefits. The board also negotiated reductions in health care costs, and so those impacts would also be included within that portion.
As well as assumed staffing levels.
Right, is correct. But what we can do is, as Mr. Shaver mentioned, and I think has been requested, is when we come back in February, we can come back and slice it and dice it in multiple ways. And for this evening, we wanted to give a sense of how the $4.1 million increase would be spent, but we can come back with exact dollar amounts, not just percentages, and slice it and dice it the various ways.
Mr. Garg, you're going to move on to the proposed rates and charges?
Yes, if desired.
And I'm going to make a proposal too.
Okay.
After you conclude this part of the presentation, we'll take like a 10, 15-minute break, and then we'll resume the presentation, okay?
Okay.
Give everybody a little break here.
Yeah. So with the proposal of two 4% increases, what we're recommending is to do a 4% increase across the board, both on the meter charge and on the commodity. These shows basically the 4% increase. They'll be effective March 1st, 2019, and then March 1st, 2020. As I mentioned, it's a 4% across the board. Same thing with the commodity rates. They would increase by 4%. As you may imagine, the impacts to your customers would be basically a 4%. What we're showing you here is different usages, 6 units, 12, 16, 23, 30, 50. We show the dollar change, and then you see the percent change. In addition, We've also conducted what we call a histogram analysis, where we look at the bills and how many customers will see a change in the bill in total dollars. So most of your customers, most of your residential customers, 62% of the bills will see a $0 to $5 increase. Some will see between 5 to 15, 37, and then very minor will see more than that. Non-residential, as you may imagine, their usage is very wide. Also, their meter charge is wide relative to how large their meter is. So that usage is sort of all over the map. But again, it's a 4% increase.
Actually, I think we can get through this section too, and then we'll take a break.
Okay. So we're going to talk about water shortage. As we know, the district's water costs are fixed, associated with capital, staffing, debt service, and water supply. When droughts occur, as we know historically what's happened is that revenues do fall significantly, especially depending on the magnitude of the drought. What we're proposing is a water shortage emergency stage rate that's a financial mechanism to help us during the drought. As you recall, you had this in the past before. This shortage would be only, it's an emergency, and it can only be utilized by approval by the board with a proper notice, a 30-day notice associated with it. So this is for the Prop 218, so the board has the option, if a drought occurs, to implement that. So we wouldn't implement it unless required under certain requirements, which I'll be talking about in a second. But the notification, a 30-day waiting period is required. So you would have basically a quasi-public hearing or a board meeting to announce this. And the stage rates will be temporarily, and it's only during the duration of the emergency. And the district is currently not in a water shortage emergency.
Sir, I have a problem with the terminology and the rationale. In the times where we've had drought, or the public impression that we were under a drought condition, we've experienced major drops in our revenues because of the imbalance in commodity versus fixed charge, service charge. That was not an emergency. That was water supply emergency. We had water supply. Now go back to the 70s when we were begging people to start flushing their toilets, for the general manager getting national publicity, to the 90s, and then again the most recent. We told them we needed it to purchase surplus, expensive, not $1 of that $12.6 million was used for that purpose. And we quickly knew that, and yet we still made that pitch to the public. When the stage rates were required, I thought we were on process, and then suddenly this language pops up in the very last meeting as a water shortage emergency. It won't be an emergency. It need not be an emergency in the sense that the crisis is going to be there, and it would not be water shortage. We have 15 years of water reserve supply in semi-tropic. We have an extraordinary reserve. 15. 150 acres. Oh, it was reported in one of our meetings. It was up to 15 years with a normal water supply emergency.
150,000 acre feet
yes,
of water.
At 10,000 acre feet a year in our IRP. So 15 years. So I have a real problem. The public can handle the truth. We don't have to try and give them a statement that sounds good, and particularly false, and which I think the circumstances in the past would indicate that this is not what we are going to encounter.
If I may, President Sethy.
Yes, please, Director Huang.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice, but here we go. I respectfully disagree with you, Director Weed. The problem with storage as semi-tropic is that in a water shortage emergency, it will be a challenge for us to actually bring that water back. You could have water in semi-tropic, you can get it back here. So it is actually a local shortage issue. So in terms of do we have enough water, I think we need to look at in terms of local supply availability. So we do respect, I do disagree.
I'm going to offer a third opinion here, which is that we set up a water banking system for a purpose. That was to help relieve the needs of the district during a drought or water supply emergency. So there are many times during a supply emergency that we will or we have been able to bring back water in the past. The problem that we ended up with is our ratepayers paid for all this water banking, right? That's a big investment that we've made. And it was only because our water allocation from the State Water Project was dropped down to zero. At zero, we couldn't use the system. That's why we couldn't bring back water. But when we were at 30% allocation, 40%, yes, we had viability to leverage our water bank. So, and Director Weed, we have 150,000 acre feet. Let's say we're using close to 40,000 acre feet a year, so that's 4 years. I know where you're coming from when you say 15, because that goes into all the water planning, all the supplies
Yes.
that we have.
We have our own groundwater reservoir. Our last crisis happened when we had intentionally withdrawn down our principal reservoir, which is our local groundwater, to work on fish ladders. And we were fairly well flat, and so we'd lost that reservoir. We were able to get federal water coming in from through Contra Costa, which helped supply it. At the last minute, we had a breakdown. And we're now working with Los Vaqueros to get the connector, which will allow us new water supplies. If we had Del Val at its full operation, or even an additional 15,000 acre feet, that problem would go away. This is at best misleading, and I believe actually it will be false if we were to use this terminology. I pray that we can find other terminology to use, whether it be a conservation, and part of it relates to your rates, because it's a revenue problem. Our problem here for this money is not really to water, it's revenue. We're leveraged on the point where we have a rate structure where we get benefits if people exceed the normal capacity, and we're penalized excessively if they cut back on their water shortage. And that penalty is revenue only. It has nothing to do with water supply.
So our proposal with the water shortage emergency is to have stages associated. This is based on the Urban Water Management Plan. There's 4 stages. These stages also could be associated not necessarily with, they can be associated with emergencies, such as an earthquake, such as other things that could occur where the water may be available, but for whatever reason we can't physically deliver it. So there's other factors, and the whole idea of this is to plan for the unknowns, because there are many scenarios out there. I think the drought is a classic example of something that we didn't think would ever occur. No one, if I talked to Bob, hey Bob, I want to place a bet with you, do you think we'll ever have a 5% allocation on the state? He would have said, no way, that would never
happened before.
Yeah, why would it happen? So this is all for the prepare for the unknown. There's scenarios out there that we don't know is going to occur that unfortunately, given the situation we are with the environment and the climate, that I think will occur. And so we're just preparing for that. And another classic example to me is the fires that just recently occurred. Fortunately, nothing will hopefully ever occur that around here, but again, these things are happening that we never anticipate.
Okay.
And another scenario would be, say, loss of the South Bay Aqueduct.
Okay.
So that truly would require us to ask our customers to conserve. That would not be a state-mandated situation, nor would it be, it's a real water supply emergency.
Okay. Part of the problem is that if we had our rate structure properly balanced, so the variable revenues matched variable expenses and fixed revenues matched, this wouldn't occur. Except in very rare circumstances. But it does occur because of the imbalance and the people stop using water. So if you replace the word contingency with, replace emergency with the word contingency, I'd be more comfortable. and remove the issue of water supply, because it's not a water shortage issue, it's a revenue shortage.
I really have to make a statement, though, in that I know what you're saying, and we've talked about this multiple times, and basically you're discussing having the service charge be 80% of the bill. And I just need to go on record that saying that's what you're proposing, a service charge being 80% of your water bill. The public doesn't like that. We don't like it. I don't like it. I don't think we need it. I think we found in the last drought where our basic bottom line bill is going to be, and I just don't see that, and I don't think the board has acted irresponsibly, and I disagree with many of the statements you've made. I just have to be public about that, because one person here, and we're all elected at large, that is correct, and maybe 20% of the population does feel the same way, but I don't think they all do, and so I don't, and I just want that to be publicly made, that I don't agree with what you're saying, and I'm just going to leave it at that for tonight, for now.
Would you accept the argument that what you're, given the polling, but it's clearly not transparency? You're arguing against a non-transparent budget structure. 100%.
Mr. President, if I could just add one point on the terminology that the director is doing. Just to refer you to the staff report, we're specifying that the use of the words water shortage emergency is directly tied to the statute that authorizes this district to actually declare a water shortage emergency. It's Water Code Section 350. And I'll just read it to you because it's just a couple sentences, but that's the context for within which this board would implement the water shortage emergency stage rates. Again, it's Water Code Section 350, and it says the governing body of a distributor of a public water supply, whether publicly or privately owned, including mutual water company, may declare a water shortage emergency condition to prevail within the areas served by such distributor whenever it finds and determines that the ordinary demands and requirements of water consumers cannot be satisfied without depleting the water supply of the distributor to the extent that there would be insufficient water for human consumption, sanitation, and fire protection. So that's the statutory framework within which this will be implemented. So I just wanted to remind the board of that, and that's why we use this particular wording.
Well, thank you, and I would point out that that circumstance has not been present when we've had our revenue shortfalls in the past, nor was it we had a 4-month period where we lost water, and then only 4 months would those circumstances have come into play. Of the 3 years where we lost $60 million in revenue. So we have a disconnect on what our real needs are and what this proposal is.
Director Weed, we've heard you. Let's try to finish here on this section.
So with the 4 stages, as you can see, we have 10%, 20%, 30%, and up to 50%. We have the associated sales associated with that. We took into account the net revenues. We actually did take into account there is some water savings, not much, but minor amount for purchasing less water. So we took that into account, and we also took into account the lost revenue. Based on those 2 information, we got the uniform stage rates associated with, that's the 3rd line, and then we added that to the proposed for fiscal year 19, and then you see that right over here. We did that again for fiscal year 19, assuming the 4% increase associated with that, and these are basically the proposed rates. So these rates would be in your Prop 218 notice. They would need to be clear. There's a lot of times with these notices, there are sometimes confusions associated with it, so it's important to do a lot of review of that and make sure there's communication that we're not implementing these are only implemented if needed. And I'm going to go over the nuances of when you declare that in a second. So what's the impact to your customers? So your current bill is, this is a person who uses 16 CCF, is $120.31. With the 4% increase and no drought, it's $125.13. If the district declared a stage 2, which is a 20% cutback, and they did not cut back, they would pay $142.19 because they're paying the drought, the surcharge now associated with that. Now, if they did cut back by 20% and they followed what you're requesting, then their bill would be $124.64. So it's pretty much the same as it was before. Hopefully we can say, no, we don't want to do whatever that wants it to do.
Defer.
Yeah, thank you very much. Updates always occur in the most inappropriate time, especially on a Friday when you're trying to leave the office. So the process. So, would you like to take a break? Right.
Yes. Let me just make one comment here on the last slide, which is that the way I interpret this, and I plan to explain this out in public if we adopt this, is that what we're doing is trying to preserve the revenue base of the district, trying to make sure our fixed costs are covered as well as variable. And this is kind of a little bit of a retort to Director Weed's angle on this. This is preservation of our revenue stream, so that we are looking at something that's predictable, sustainable, no matter what the circumstances are. So it's trying to meet, in my opinion, the same criteria that you're looking for, Director Weed. It's just a little bit different approach. Instead of imposing a much higher service charge, we're doing it through the staged rates to maintain the revenue stream.
Okay. I would understand that, and I agree. But let us note that in the last time when we had a $60 million shortfall, we had a comparable drought surcharge. It raised $12.6 million. Of the $60 million we required, the additional the remainder of that was done by cutting off our capital construction programs for a while, not paying our OPEB bills, doing an accounting change to pre-book the facility connection charges, and everything else to make up that. Next time around, given inflation, it'll be about a $90 million shortfall because the base problem was a dysfunctional rate structure.
Okay. We'll leave that to a good debate on a long drive someplace. All right, why don't we take a break until we'll resume at around 8:15, and we're adjourning, or I shouldn't say adjourning, recessing here at 8:04. Meeting back at 8:18. Mr. Garg, you're back on.
All right.
Technology.
Thank you. All right, here, okay? So when would we declare a water shortage emergency? We would use the Urban Water Management Plan. It has a process associated with it. We are using the water code sections as stated right over here. There's a lot of detailed information here, but it isn't basically it's not an arbitrary thing. It is a process where we're looking at how much water we have available. We look at other resources. Staff does a very diligent work in making sure we can meet demand. If we can't, then we present that information to the board. The board would declare emergency. Based on that declaration, then we could look at implementing stage rates.
So a quick question on that. So I'm still a little bit confused because water shortage emergency seems to imply more of a supply problem, but in order to declare a water shortage emergency, there has to be a demand issue. So do we have to call it a water shortage emergency stage rate, or do we have flexibility in the terminology that we use there?
My recommendation, if you're using the trigger as Water Code Section 350 and the other code section that you're referring to, which is similar statute worded in the County Water District Law, that you link it to the definition of water shortage emergency in statutes, if that's going to be your trigger.
I'm not sure, Director Akbari, what you meant by the demand side.
Well, I guess maybe I went a little bit ahead, but in order for us to implement each stage, there has to be a certain amount of conservation in place, as I'm understanding it, which to me, that's more of a demand issue, but just the way that we're phrasing it to the public is implying that there's a water shortage, which implies a supply issue, not a demand issue, which is why I was wondering what flexibility we have.
Yeah, so if I may, so what the mechanism is that based on current water supplies that are available to the district, staff would analyze whether we need to curtail demand to maintain adequate water supply reliability. So once the analysis is done that says, well, if demand stays the same, we will draw down our supplies to levels that are insufficient to provide the reliability that we want to. So what you're asking is saying, okay, what level of curtailed demand do we need so that the supply levels remain adequate? So you put in, if it's 20%, then you're saying, okay, we're in a 20% stage rate kind of environment here. We want 20%, it's a stage 2. So we really need our customers to conserve 20% with known water supplies. And so that's kind of the mechanism. So it's not we're trying to reduce demand sort of arbitrarily. It's we're doing the analysis and we need to reduce demand, and stage rates is a mechanism to do that. And while we do it, we also maintain adequate revenue to cover the cost of the district. So does that make sense?
Okay, might I phrase that question a little differently? In a situation where we have adequate water supply, but we see a sudden drop in demand, what do we have another option? If the circumstances do not exist that we have water, but our demands have dropped off precipitously,
and
the 23% drop off that we encountered in the last drought, not because of our own efforts, but because of the the media that was out there and the media push. What other and we can't make that finding to have that we have a problem with water. What do we have any other option to generate the revenues we need to make up the revenue shortfall to cover our cost of operations? Do we go in debt? What do we do?
So
wouldn't we do what we did the last time around, which is to go out with a 218 notice with we effectively put in tiered rates, right? And the argument was that we had to meet our cost of service for the district.
So if I can jump in here,
Yeah.
the circumstance you describe would not trigger the water shortage emergency
exactly.
stage rates. So as you mentioned, the district would need to evaluate other options, but you could not use the stage rates as they're described in the proposal.
Precisely. And that was my concern, that if we ran into that situation, we'd have to find something other than staged rates to address the revenue shortfall, which I suspect over 3 years, if we use the same scenario, increased by 50%, it'll be $90 million over a 3-year period of time. That's a lot of money just to operate the district, and it comes back to our rate structure.
But just to clarify, the district was in a water supply emergency the last time we implemented drought surcharges.
So let me
Correct, the
ask-
district, this board declared a water shortage emergency.
Yeah.
Right.
So
But
your
when
general
they-
manager is absolutely correct.
And that was following the governor's declaration, or when the...
This district was
No,
ahead of
we
the
were
governor,
ahead of the governor.
Okay, but, okay.
based on the district's circumstances at the time. That's what the district did, so the governors followed that.
So, Mr. Miyake, this is exactly what I wanted to draw out from our general counsel here. I want it on the public record so that the public understands that this water board can independently declare a water shortage emergency. Does not have to be tied to what the governor's doing. It's
That is correct.
very regional and local to
That is correct.
district.
But again, we need to be sure we satisfy the statutes, the statutory requirements that we've identified in the proposal.
Right. Okay. You're back on. We're up to,
And you know, just what I've heard in the past from you, the board, is the concern of not having a process and not being transparent and being very clear. And so this is what we're doing. This is very clear and transparent. I mean, it's clear in the sense that there's steps here that you're following. So you can't be accused of being arbitrary and imposing these stage rates whenever you want. It's only when
Right.
certain circumstances occur, then you would impose them.
and I think in all the communication out to the public, we need to emphasize that we are operating where we are trying to cover cost of service.
So for that to occur, the board would give a 30-day notice, advance notice that the stage rates would be implemented. As mentioned, it would follow the urban water management plan, which has 4 stages already in place. The proposed stage rates are calculated to take into account the shortfall of revenue and also the savings associated with reduction in water supply costs.
Are we able to borrow money to cover operating costs?
No.
So if that avenue isn't available to us, I'm still concerned, a bit bewildered about what will happen in the circumstances where we have a dramatic drop in consumption and our revenues plummet.
Right, so
Mr. Wunderlich.
right, I think in that scenario where we have a fall off in revenue, but no water shortage emergency, we would be looking at a few things. One, we'd be looking at spending down our rate stabilization reserve. We would probably also be looking at, our current financial situation is such that we also have reserves above our target, so we'd probably be spending those down. But eventually what it would get to is us as staff coming back to the board and discussing how we should best address that on an ongoing basis. So we would be looking at rate adjustments eventually in that type of scenario.
And potentially cost cutting.
And that requires a 218 process, though.
Yes,
And
it
so
would
there's
require
a
218
certain time
process.
delay in this, so.
Right.
Okay.
Next, I'm going to turn over to Michael Yee to talk about customer assistance.
Thank you, Sanjay. And congratulations, board, again on your award of distinction, both corporate and individually. That's wonderful.
You contributed to it as well.
Poquito. Well, I'm going to try to bring us home here. Customer Assistance Program, Help on Tap, which the board implemented March 2017. Just want to give a quick status and a proposal for that. The Help on Tap, or HOT program, provides qualifying customers a $20 credit currently towards the bi-monthly service charge. And the eligibility is pegged at 200% of the federal poverty level, which is about $33,000 for a household of 1 or 2 people. As of November 30th this year, 927 customers are receiving the credit. And many customers that are initially denied are eventually approved. And the reason they're initially denied is typically for lack of data or information or documents. They eventually become approved. Only 129 customers have been outright denied. The recommendation for February 7th will be that the credit be increased to $25 to help mitigate the impact of the proposed rate increase, and that we maintain the current guideline at 200% of FPL, and that we'll continue to just collect data and wait for AB 401 guidelines to become more solid from the control board.
Can I add to the information on this chart? So, Director Weed and I asked that this be reviewed at the Finance Committee some time back, and that we look at what our current and projected non-water revenues would be that are accessible for this kind of program. So just using the, without expanding upon non-water revenue, just what we're using right now, we have about $300,000 available. So if we were at 1,000 customers at $20 with 6 billing periods, cycles in the year, that would be $120,000, roughly. So Director Weed and I felt we had the opportunity to at least think about the prospect of maybe there might be 2,000 customers that eventually qualify. So now you're up to about 240,000, and our recommendation along with staff was that we increase the help on tap figure up to $25 because there's sufficient revenue, non-water revenue, to do that. And this would open up the door to not only expanding the breadth of the program, but also the depth by offering $25 discount. For most people, that's half the service charge. Okay. Comments or questions?
Do we have an estimate on how many more customers would qualify for the program who haven't yet registered?
I think initially the analysis showed about 2,000 ultimately eligible at this time.
So even with the increase, we would still have enough in the budget to be able to accommodate if
yes.
miraculously we got 100% of those customers.
Yes, still seems to be some free board there, yes.
Right, and I think what we're seeing on this program is that maybe there are not as many customers out there eligible as we initially thought. You know, many of the customers who might be eligible perhaps live in apartment buildings or are tenants, and the bill's in the landlord's name, so they're not our direct customers. So that's, I think, one of the challenges we've experienced and why we're seeing fewer customers participating than we had thought. So, I mean, there's definitely still room to go above the 927, but, you know, I would guess that we're probably not going to get up to 2,000.
Do we have an estimate of how many customers would be eligible for the program if we were to increase the minimum income by, say, 50% or 100%?
Right, so that's one of the big challenges we have is there's very good data reporting through the Census Bureau on households at 200% or less of the poverty level, but there's not reporting on, say, subsequent increments, so we don't know how many people there are at 250% or 300% or 400%. So we really have no way to provide a good estimate, and that's why you know, we're recommending that we essentially wait and see what the state board does with AB 401 and see what sort of recommendations and eventual program they might put forward.
And are our eligibility requirements roughly on par with those of other agencies who have a similar program?
It's the same as SFPUC. It's also the same as the PG&E program known as California Alternate Rates for Energy or CARE.
AB 401 was due, the guidelines were due, by legislation, February 28th of the current year. We are still waiting for those?
That's correct. We do not know when they will be provided.
So this is just a comment. I'm definitely willing to wait for AB 401 to give us some more clarity, but I do want us to think of the possibility of raising the minimum eligibility, because at 200% of federal poverty level, if what I looked up is correct, for household 2 is $33,000 a year.
Very low.
I am not quite sure you could even live on that for 2 people in this district. For household 4 is what, $50K, somewhere there. So that's really, really low. Especially we have seniors that's on fixed income that do need this assistance.
Right.
So I would encourage us, once we have more clarity from AB 401, let's rethink about this. Thank you.
That's the typical customer participating in this program are seniors on a fixed income who have probably been in their home for 50 or more years in many cases.
AB 401 appears to be indirectly tied to the state water tax for a funding mechanism. Should that come around, I would hope that we could negotiate with the state to become the provider and operator of the AB 401 and receive monies directly from the state to fund this program, if it meets their 401 guidelines.
I'm on 2 ACWA committees, the State Water Management Committee, and which we had a report at ACWA just recently, and the local legislative committee. So what I heard from both committees was, and this was just 2 weeks ago, that we should have clarity on AB 401 by the end of the first quarter. Some people were suggesting by early March. So we may have something to work with there.
Great.
Yeah, we have the prospect of the state coming in and operating an overlaying or parallel program to ours.
Right.
So we'll have to see how that
And
plays
let me
out.
buttress the remarks of Director Huang. In our committee, Director Weed and I were supporting, along with what Director Akbari is suggesting too, perhaps trying to expand the top line for qualification here into the program. But we wanted to take this one step at a time. We felt it was more necessary to give a deeper discount. We started at $15 originally. We bumped it up to $20. As we're getting more customers, we don't want to overshoot the available revenue that we have. So let's see where things go, and maybe down the road we'll take another look at.
Agree.
Great, thank you. Great comments. So I just wanted to cover a couple of the miscellaneous rates and charges we are going to be proposing to change in February. So after hours connection charge, $180 to $190, and these are effective March 1st is the proposal for next year. Damage angle stop, $306 to $317 for really bad customers. Electric vehicle charging stations out here in front, from $1.25 to $1.65 per hour. Field charge, reconnection charge, slight increase. Fire hydrant meter charges, the deposit for the meter itself, as well as the reduced pressure backflow prevention device, is going up from $15.48 to $16.05. And the late return fee, going up a few dollars, as well as the overdue reading fee for that. The meter jumper assembly charges, again, that's a bit of an increase for the deposit for the device itself, as well as the monthly rental fee. And the meter reinstallation charge going up a few dollars.
Michael, I think it would be worthwhile highlighting why the electric vehicle charging went up from $1.25 to $1.65.
Yes.
That's a pretty hefty percentage increase.
Yes.
There's a reason behind it.
Primarily for the electric cost itself, electricity. It's gone up quite a bit.
PG&E.
PG&E. Yep. Okay. So, next steps after all this has been said and done. The staff is recommending to the board tonight to set a public hearing for February 7th of next year at 6 o'clock p.m. for consideration of the proposed revisions to water rates and charges and the new water shortage emergency stage rates for March 1st effective date. 2, authorize staff to mail notifications, Prop 218 notices, to all property owners in the district, customers, and all other district mailing addresses of the proposed 2-year commodity rate and service charge revisions, as well as the new water shortage emergency stage rates. And 3, set another public hearing for the same date, February 7th, for consideration of the proposed revisions to the development-related charges, effective on May 1st of next year.
I've got one more wild idea, if I might. We've talked about HOT program and trying to help people out. A number of these charges might be impacting people who've encountered some financial difficulties. Do we have a provision, or might we create a provision, by which we can either waive or find a fund that would be able to pay for some of the fees if we have someone who meets the economic disadvantaged criteria?
Well, John, you want?
So we do allow on the late fees a one-time waiver per year for a customer experiencing a hardship. But none of these fees are specific to customers who may be experiencing a hardship. So for example, last year we discussed at length the return check fee. We're not proposing any changes to that this year. What we're proposing, for example, the only one of these maybe that I might think about is the field charge from $43 to $44. That is what somebody pays to reconnect their service after it's been disconnected. So there is a $1 increase we're proposing there. The after-hours connection charge also sometimes occurs, but given the cost of this, most customers wait until the next morning, so this is not a charge that's assessed very frequently. And the reason it's so high is because of our labor agreements specify a minimum number of hours when a utility worker is brought in who's on standby. And so that's why it's high to recover the actual district costs of performing that activity.
Okay. And one thing not here is the fee for putting a doorknob hanger on a door as we go into particularly with the new legislation relating to cutting off water. And it's not specifically on this pattern, but there was talking to at Aqua, one company which used DHL at $11 per doorknob hanger to put it on, and could even get a photograph with date stamp that's showing the hanger on the door. One time we were estimating it was $40 for our employee to go out and perform that same service. So hopefully we can continue to look at those and give whatever flexibility we can to the staff to be able to help people who might otherwise say, assuming they qualify for the HOT program, whatever criteria we come up with. So the TAP program.
And staff is extremely kind and accommodating to the customers. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So in terms of the calendar for the next couple months, we will, at the board's pleasure, be mailing out the Proposition 218 notices by next Friday, which is the deadline, and starting the public outreach campaign through various social media, websites, newspaper articles, bill messages, etc. As well as after the new year, the developer notification letter will be mailed out. And this year we're having actually 2 community meetings planned for January in various places around the district. And February 7th then is the board meeting, where we will hopefully have, at the board's pleasure, the public hearings, as well as the consideration of the miscellaneous rates and fees. And again, we're shooting for a March 1st effective date for the commodity rates, service charges, emergency stage rates, and miscellaneous charges, and a May 1st effective date for all the developer-related charges. And that concludes the formal presentation. Happy to welcome any questions.
I have some questions here real quick. It's in reference to
Prop 218?
218 notice. We're not going to be using this kind of paper stock to mail,
No.
are we?
No, something thinner and less expensive.
Okay. I just have a little bit of feedback here because I'm looking at this for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
This is quite a bit different from our
It's quite a bit
former
amped up, yes.
218 notices, which
Mhm.
were much briefer in information. And we had requests from the public that we offer more information, but now I feel overwhelmed.
Careful what you ask for, right?
The other piece of feedback I have here is, I know you can't change this at the last minute because we have to get this out in the next week, but I have seen in other Prop 218 notices where the graphics are a little bit more easily understood. I think you have the right representation here on the $2 bills, but I can't even read what's at the bottom underneath these items. I think we probably will hear from people saying, you know, my goodness, I can't read that. I like the fact that we're highlighting here our comparison to other agencies as we normally do. And I'm not sure. Yeah, so I want to thank the staff. I had been making a recommendation for some time that we indicate by dollar amount on the chart where the other districts were relative to where we are. We always put the bars down, but we never put we only put our dollar amount down. We didn't say what the dollar amount was for the other districts. So here we have a scale at the bottom, which helps people to understand that our rates are roughly half of the rates in some other cities. And I also wanted to note that on October 25th, Zone 7 had its rate hearing for proposed rate increase, and so they went with a 4-year 218 notice with a pretty hefty increase over 4 years.
I believe, I may be off by a couple of tenths of a percent, but it was a 4-year 7.9% annual increase with a 2-year look-in.
Right, yeah.
By their board.
Did they not also adjust the ratio of commodity and service charge?
Well, I've asked Mr. Shaver to look into this for us a little deeper, but it was published in their local newspaper that currently their service charge covers 35% of their costs of doing business. They're trying to move that up to about 43% and eventually trying to get it up to 65%. But I don't know if we're comparing apples to apples here. So, because they're a wholesaler and
yeah, it's
there's a different cost structure.
Only have 4 customers to show them complex financial information. It's a little more challenging to explain that to 84,000 customers.
Right. And for some folks here, they know that I like to go through other water districts' CAFRs. But I've never had the ability to compare ACWD with Zone 7 because they work with such an antiquated accounting model and financial model. It's very difficult to read through one of their annual financial reports. I mentioned this to the new incoming General Manager, Valerie Pryor, and she said, guess what? I also recognize the same thing, and we're moving to a standardized CAFR like other water districts. So that will give us another data point to compare ourselves with.
For wholesale.
Director, we don't get too excited yet about them moving up.
No. As is pointed out, they're a different animal. A lot like Santa Clara, they're wholesalers in Monterey Peninsula.
Yeah, but I thought if you heard the 65%
Akbar Valley.
That's amazing. All right, so last question. Do we know how much this will cost to mail out for in aggregate?
Yes, we do.
Wow. No, I meant, wasn't prepared to have such a quick answer. Johnny on the spot.
We know our directors.
may note that we have the main cleaning notification on there as well, so that is a postcard that we won't be mailing out, because we were able to include that in there, so it's awesome.
Great.
And
Thank you for having that on the top of your head.
And to remind the board, we mail this to every physical address and every customer. So it's more than 84,000. It's like
Right,
120,000 or so. 127,000. I sit corrected.
Well, anyway, I just want to say this is pretty good work. Pretty comprehensive.
So we will basically be finalizing this tomorrow, so that we can hit our printing deadline and mailing deadline to make sure that we give the required amount of notice to our customers and residents in time for the February 7th public hearing.
And the reason we moved up the date from the 14th?
There was one director who was not able to attend the February 14th meeting, and I know that no director wants to miss a public hearing on rates, so we complied with that availability.
Okay, thanks for reminding me.
We also got away from Valentine's Day.
Right. That's good. So we're at the conclusion of our presentation?
Yes, we are.
Any more questions, comments from the board? Or the public? I see the public. Why don't we have the public first?
Okay.
We'll close with board comments. Sure. Yes.
So, first of all, I would like to commend the board for, I think this is the first time in many years where the proposed rate increase is in line with the time value of money as represented by the mathematical average of 12-month LIBOR and prime rate. So good job there. I also want to commend the board on fixing the fire surcharge effectively, right? The oversized meter charge required for the sprinklers. So that's good. My comment really is again on this stage rate, which we've heard lots of debate back and forth. My concern is that that stage rate would be implemented from the first drop. And since we heard debate about help on tap, the help on tap basically represents 6 units of water on a bi-monthly basis. So one proposal is to exempt the first 6 units of water against the stage rate, in effect pushing effectively a tiered rate structure. And then on the topic of tiered rates, having listened to Director Weed, I understand the situation, and having listened to the district council, I can see a situation where water is available, but at a cost greater than what you recoup. So at 4.419 per unit, that's $19.25 an acre foot. And if I recall correctly, there was periods of time where the spot price of water was excess of $3,000 an acre foot. So you could be in a situation where water is available, and therefore you'd be hard-pressed to trigger Water Code 350, but you'd have to buy it at a higher price than you could sell it for. And as Director Weed would quickly point out, that's a bad business practice. So that, again, is a rationale for implementing tiered rates, where if the district were compelled to be in a situation where water was available, would be forced to buy that water at a rate higher than what they could recoup, that water could be passed along to the customers that are using the most water at the commensurate rate equivalent to the actual procurement costs. And I believe that would be in compliance with Capistrano. So, and I believe that the proposal to exempt the first 6 units, or whatever value the board elects, if they choose to take the suggestion from the stage rate, would be in line with the proposed 218 notice, because it would actually be a reduction. It's basically less than what the 218 is asking for. Thank you.
Thanks again for your comments. Okay, we'll open it back to the board.
First question, will we have an opportunity to discuss the 4% and 4% for the 2 years?
Go for it.
I would support, based on, in my mind, the good business practice of having a positive net operating expense and not a net operating loss. And 8% and 4% is something I could support. I think that would be would true up our budget and our expenses. The second point I would make is we started a process to try and get our what was a really skewed rate structure, where we at one time a few years back we were only 9% on the service charge. We now have it up to 32%. None of these extra heavy reserves and all these other things. We could do some planning. We could have some predictability if we could move it forward. Our failure to be able to continue that advancement, which other districts are doing, South Coast is up to 65% service, 35% commodity, and they found stability. They can do a 4 or 5 year 218. We can't plan this current year, much less 3 or 4 years, because there's no correlation between our revenue and our expenses. So to that end, at some point you have to make a protest. We'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Director Huang?
Well, I guess it's no secret that I actually did not like the 4% and 4% in the last workshop. Actually, we'd rather we go with a 3%. The purpose of the district is to collect enough money for our operation, is not to have lots and lots of reserves. I guess that's the best way to put it. We have to remember that we're elected here to represent our customers. In an ideal world, I would wish to operate this agency as what Director Weed would wish, which is having revenue stability. But what we need to balance in the rate increase is our customers' desire and their ability to pay. I know we have a Help on Tap program, but as I point out, as it stands right now, it will only help a very small segment of our population. There's a segment of our population that would not be helped by Help on Tap, but this rate increase would still affect their fixed income, would potentially require a lifestyle change. To that end, I really don't like the 4%, but I also understand that we could always end up with less. And I am open to support this proposed 218, while keeping an open mind, waiting to hear from our customers as to what they think about this rate increase. Thank you.
So I'm supportive of the staff recommendation. I think the proposal gives us some good flexibility, especially when it comes to paying off our unfunded liabilities, and also when it comes to financing our AMI project. We would have a good amount of flexibility there as well. I like the idea of also increasing the Help on Tap program to mitigate this increase for some of our more needy customers, but would be open at a later date to explore expanding the pool of customers that the program would help.
I'll support the 4%. 4%. The money is going to be going certainly that 1% increase is supposed to be going to the AMI program, which I support. I think we need to start heading in that direction, and we're going to have to come up with some funding to do that. It's a daunting task, but it's necessary, in my opinion. As far as how we collect our money, I just want to state we know approximately what an average water bill will be in a severe drought. So we have a pretty good idea now. We didn't before, but I think we have a pretty good idea now what our revenues will be baseline. It didn't come out to 80%, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about 4%, so I don't want to be going into something where I shouldn't be and having lawyers start yelling at me. I think it's a good move. We have to be cognizant that our bills are getting higher. There was a time when I forgot to pay my water bill because it was so low. Back then, of course, ATMs were still, they were out by that point. But, people still paid with checks. So for those who don't know what a check is, these things you used to write. Had to write them very carefully. And so writing a $12 or $24 check, it just slipped through. It's not that way anymore. We're now talking $120. So we have to remember that. And I'm not saying I'm the one that voted, there was a swing vote on the 100% increase in the service charge. I felt that was necessary, and I think it's still to this day. I support that. But I also think we're getting to a level where we're good. So that's what I've got. I'm good with it. We're going to have to sell it.
Okay. I will support the staff recommendation also for 4% rate increase. But let me make a few comments. Just to reiterate what I said earlier in the meeting, I wish that we had been presented with the fact that it takes an 8%, 4% rate increase for water sales, our product revenue, to cover operating expenses, including depreciation and amortization. That doesn't mean I would have supported an 8% rate increase. I felt that something in between 4 and 8 was appropriate, which is why I was pushing for 5% at the workshop, 5 and 4, because I still believe that there's room for expansion on improving demand coming out of the drought. And if we're seeing improved demand, there's maybe a middle ground in there that we could achieve. So I wish we'd gone with 5.4. I wish we'd known that what it takes to get to 8.4. And I'm going to deviate from the thinking of Director Akbari here, and hopefully we can have a side conversation about it. But my opinion is that, and Director Huang too, we are not creating, in meeting our operating expenses, including depreciation, the goal is not to create excess reserves. The goal is any product-based business, not a services business, but any product-based business, the reason is to be able to pay your bills. And we can't pay our bills properly. We can't pay down the unfunded liabilities. You don't have the extra revenue to have expensive capital improvement projects where we're paying for it instead of going out to the bond market and borrowing it. We're trying to create the cash flow that's necessary to run our business. That's why we target trying to have over the last 10 years, try to get to that point where your water sales cover these things. That creates the cash flow from all the other revenue coming into the district. So it takes, I have a view that I've developed over my career of how you properly run and manage a business. And this is fundamental to running a product-based business, which is what we are. Our product is our water. So that's what I want to say about the financial model that we have. And I feel like we're backing away from the commitment that we had made. Second, we don't have a lot of flexibility when it comes to unfunded liabilities. And I'll explain why. We've had in previous board presentations, I've given some handouts of what happens when the market goes down, the stock market, and how it affects the value of what we've contributed to pension and healthcare costs. And every time we go into a recession, like we did last time, we were fairly well funded as a percentage. But when we dropped down into the recession, the value of our investments dropped in half. After 10 years, we're only approaching where we were before the last recession. And we're at the end of a long economic cycle. I've been warning the board and the district that we were approaching already at the beginning of the year. I said, once the yield curve started to invert, you could look forward to a recession coming on. So I would say that by not going with an 8% or 5 to 8% and then a 4% rate increase, what we are exposing ourselves to is a lower value or percentage or contribution to health and pension costs will be lowered by the next economic downturn that we go into. And so we need to consider that when we're setting rates. We need to consider what our future costs are going to be for the district. It's not supposed to be some feel-good number. You put your finger up in the air and you say, yeah, this feels good. No, there has to be some business rationale behind what you're proposing. I feel like we're falling short on it right now. And mark my word, we will see a turn in the economic cycle, and we will see the value of our investments in health and retirement benefits going down. And we're going to have to play catch-up all over again. So that's my set of comments.
If we have one more quick round. We only get to address some of these fundamental issues every 2 years. I would like to thank Director Gunther for giving us a vote to make a bump in the service charge. But for that, we would have had, for having a $60 million shortfall in the last drought, we would have been over $80 million. So it was $20 million less we had to take out of Hyde. We started the process. There should be nothing taken out of Hyde if we had a proper balance between revenues and expenses. Variable revenues match variable expenses. Fixed revenues match fixed expenses. Other districts are approaching that. And it doesn't have to be absolute. It could be closer. I suspect our next downturn in the same circumstances will be about $90 million. With surcharge and a huge devastation, and it's totally unnecessary. So my no vote on this will be recognizing that it's only 1 and 2 years that we have a chance to try and correct a fundamental problem with our district and our financing. Thank you.
I would like to just throw in one other thought here too. You know, I've thought about this a lot since our workshop, the last one we had. You know, I'm comfortable. I don't want to create a a chasm here in the board. And I was predicating part of my thinking about what's a proper rate adjustment for this next year on increasing demand. But, you know, when you go back and you look at our CAFRs from previous years, what becomes really well illustrated is that when we had the drought, demand went down, right? But when we had our economic downturns, you can look back decades on our financials. Every time we've had a downturn in the economy, we've seen demand drop. And it's coming not only from people conserving more residentially, because some people lose their jobs, they have lower incomes, there's turnover in the community, but you see a lot of businesses cutting back. And so in the last economic downturn, we saw a large part of our industrial sector turn down, a lot of businesses closed, we had a lot of empty shops around the Tri-City area, lots of restaurants closed. And so if we are approaching that point in the economic cycle that we're going to see a downturn, the next downturn in demand might be attributed to that, not a drought. And so I've always said, even prior to being on this board, that the district needed to get to the point where it had revenue stability and reliability to account for both types of situations. Downturn in the economy, or drought, or the worst case, they're both happening at the same time. Just food for thought.
Amen.
I think we need to have a long drive, too.
You disagree?
I got some questions.
Okay, that should make
questions with how you're thinking, how I'm thinking, what I'm missing or what I'm not missing. So, just saying that.
Hey, anytime I can spur on a good debate, I'm all for it.
It'll be a lovely debate, 'cause I really trust your opinion, but I think there's a shortfall here, but that's fine.
Okay.
So, if I may, we do have 3 proposed staff recommendations. We probably should put that slide up. Slide number... I can't read it. 37.
Hey, I'm always happy to learn, too.
Well, you have 3 proposed action items before you.
And these are to cover both 5.13 and 1.4?
Yes.
So
somebody needs to make a motion on each one?
The first 2 are related to 5.13, and the third bullet point is related to 5.14. If you wanted to take the actions based on your...
So I would suggest you take the first 2 as one motion, and the third one as a second.
Okay, so we'll open it up for a recommendation on 5.13.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and recommend 5.13, which would, as I understand it, be the first 2 staff recommendations, correct?
Correct. And that would be to set the public hearing for the consideration of the rates, and then secondly, to authorize staff to mail the Prop 218 notices to all property owners in the district, customers, and other mailing addresses.
So this is 5.13 only, the water-related rates?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Director Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed?
No.
And Sethy.
Aye. And what I don't see here is any affirmation of the 4%.
So the affirmation is that the 4% is the proposed rate increase that we will be sending out to the community. So the board will not make a final decision on the rate increases until after the public hearing, and it can be as high as what we sent out to the community, but no higher, and it can be lower.
Okay. And, yeah, okay, that's fine.
So then the third item pertains to setting a separate public hearing for the consideration of the proposed revisions to the development-related charges on February 7th as well.
Do I have a motion on item 5.14?
I'll move 5.14.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. Okay, we're now at reports, and are there any public comments or board comments on board committee reports? How about section 6.2, operational reports? Do we have an update from anybody on staff as to where we are on the rainfall report? I saw we were right at average for what was in the board packet.
Any additional rains in the board packet?
I think Andy's going to try to pull it up.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Sorry.
Is that the one? Okay.
So we're
Yeah,
right
up on
at
the screen, we, for the month of December through December 5th, we received an additional 0.62 inches of rain. So our cumulative total is up to 3.48 inches. We are below average for December, but of course we haven't made it all the way through the month of December yet. We do have some rainfall coming this weekend, so we're hoping for about a half inch of rain coming.
So I took a couple of rides on BART up to Oakland and saw that where the levels were in Quarry Lakes. And we've come down quite a bit. There's quite a bathroom tub ring around each reservoir. Do we know where we are on the groundwater situation? I didn't look in detail.
Below the fault, groundwater we're at 12.1. So we've come up about a foot and a half since our low point in November. So in November we were down at 10.3, so we're up to 12.1.
We have the dams up right now?
I have the information. Rubber Dam 1 is up, and Rubber Dam 3 is down.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ind.
Okay.
And let's see here. Any other board comments, questions, operational reports? The staff presentation we've already had, that's item 6.3. We're down to 6.4, the general manager's report.
Yes, and I've got 4 relatively quick items for you, including the one on your agenda. And the one on the agenda pertains to the Alameda County chapter of the California Special District Association. It's that time where they're requesting who the agency designated representative is, as well as the designated agency alternate. And currently filling in those roles are President Sethy and Director Weed. They have both indicated that they're interested in continuing their roles, and I just put this on the agenda so that the whole board would hear that. And this is a presidential prerogative on who serves on these organizations outside the district per the district board rules. So this is informational at this point. So I just wanted to let the board know.
I think it's good that Director Weed and I continue for one special reason. We were elected by all the special districts in the county to to be the representative to the Alameda County Oversight Board.
I don't see any changes coming.
So if we don't go forward with this responsibility again, then we throw a monkey wrench into everything that the county's doing.
If it's presidential, I don't see any changes coming.
Okay.
So, yeah, at least until the end of this meeting. So, also, wanted to let the board know that ACWD has been notified that there's a vacancy on the Aqua Region 5 board again. Director Weed has expressed interest in serving in that role. So unless I hear otherwise, I will be placing a consent item on the January board meeting so that we can complete the required board resolution for that to happen. Also related to Aqua, you may remember that I indicated that I would express interest in being appointed to the State Legislative Committee. As it turns out, I've been elected to be the chair of CalDSal for this year. So I'm actually pleased to announce that the Region 5 board appointee will be Jennifer Allen of Contra Costa Water District, and I'm totally fine with that. In fact, she has been attending regularly as an observer, so I think that's appropriate. The third item is the board is aware that yesterday the State Water Resources Control Board acted related to the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. If the board is interested, I can summarize that now. If not, I can put that in an email and forward it to the board what happened. But basically, a deal has not been brokered. The state board is going to require the 40% unimpaired flows to the San Joaquin River. San Francisco PUC was not successful in terms of being part of a settlement agreement. They tried to get the state board to kind of include them with other entities. The recalcitrant agencies are the agencies on the Merced and the Stanislaus basins. But the interest on the Tuolumne apparently reached agreement. But San Francisco is concerned about sort of being a lone wolf and would rather be grouped with other parties.
Bosco would like to join them, but it's been kept off the table.
So what this means for ACWD is definitely water supply impacts to our San Francisco supply that are not well defined yet. So we'll be working with both San Francisco and obviously Bosco to better understand those impacts. The state board did leave open the option of a settlement agreement, but the deadline for completing something like that would be March 1st, and it would have to be holistic. It's definitely still a pretty steep hill to climb. It's also expected that now that San Francisco has received this information, they will strive to obtain alternative water supplies to sort of hedge. And that includes the proposed indirect potable reuse project that we have RFPs out on for services in partnership with Union Sanitary District and ACWD. So that's the report there. I can forward more complete information.
If I can add one quick point, San Francisco comment made at Aqua is that they are considering raising Calaveras to a higher level of the dam for more storage.
Late breaking news, the ACWD website is now updated. It is going live on Monday, December 17th. So log in and take a look at it. And hopefully you like what you see. And then the last item is that there was a water main break in Union City this evening. You may have seen Mr. Peterson running around a little bit, as well as Shireen dealing with, there was some media coverage, and I'll let Mr. Peterson explain what happened so that you're better informed in case you're asked maybe tomorrow if you're out in the community.
I get home tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shaver. If you could put the map up first, Andy. So on Union City Boulevard and Betancourt Way, which is an intersection just south of Whipple Boulevard, we had a 14-inch ACP main break. The leak was first reported at 2 o'clock this afternoon. There was a contractor working for PG&E that had two large vacuum trucks working in the street in the vicinity of the leak. We're not in a position yet to know whether they were the cause of the break, but they were in the vicinity. The main was isolated at around 6:30 this evening. There are about 5 to 6 industrial customers affected. It will probably won't be until around midnight before crews can access the main and determine the cause of the break and begin repair work. The street needs to be dewatered. Union City needs to de-energize the street lights near the main break in order for us to work safely. The main is about 7 to 8 feet deep, and so the trench would need to be excavated, shored, and dewatered before we can access the pipe. Shereen's been in communication with multiple media outlets, and Shereen, do you want to just mention which media companies or outlets you've been in communication with? I know Fox News was one of them.
Fox News, Bay City News, and there was also some coverage on CBS, Channel 5, NBC Bay Area, and
Okay. So, boy, we got great graphics and optics up here. Okay, let's go to the...
Betancourt.
Okay. All right. I just wanted you to see where it was. It's west of Interstate 880 in Union City. Near, if you're on Union City Boulevard, the intersection to go to USD is on Betancourt.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to orient you where the break is located. So can you go to the photograph, please?
Steve, I'm sorry if I missed this, but you said it was a contractor working for USD that was in the area?
No, PG&E.
Okay.
And I'm not connecting the dots necessarily. It would be great if I could, but I don't want to make an accusation.
Sure.
Oh boy.
This is the Union City Boulevard at around 6:30 this evening, and so I just wanted to show you how severe the damage can be when a 14-inch main it breaks. So.
Steve, I'm looking at that picture about how much water was running over those tracks.
I don't know. I don't know if it was a clean break, whether the entire pipe broke open, or whether it was just a small fracture. And, well, this would be a large fracture.
It looks like Union City Boulevard is closed.
So the northbound lanes between the shoulder and the median were completely flooded.
This is a main route, by the way, to the Union City Kaiser. For
Correct. That is correct.
It's not too bad. It's north of that.
So I have a police...
coming from the Newark side.
Still good. It's the Hayward side.
So I have a police communique. It says that Union City Police advises that the northbound Union City Boulevard is closed between Smith and Whipple Road Way. So if you're coming off the freeway to get to Kaiser and you're on Whipple, I believe Kaiser is north of Whipple on
but if
Union.
you're coming from Newark on
You would,
Union City
correct.
Boulevard.
If you're on Union City Boulevard, you would have to have a detour.
My bus will pass by it tomorrow. I'll check it out for you.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Steve, do you know if the leak has been isolated?
Yes, it was isolated around 6:30 this evening. And so I don't expect us to be able to get to the pipe until midnight tonight,
Right.
and then to begin to understand what the problem is, how bad the break is, in order to effect repairs.
Let's make sure nobody gets electrocuted.
Definitely. Okay, that's all I have.
And that's all I have.
Okay, so we're on to director's comments and reports. How about if we just go down the dais here?
A quick follow-up thought on the AMI workshop we had. We were given a financial analysis. I have a concern because I believe that if you look at what the implications are of conservation through AMI, and you look at through the lens of our rate structure, you'll find that the payback time is actually extended, not reduced. We may well be extending it closer to the 20-year mark, because when we have conservation, we have a disproportionate loss of revenue. The other aspect of that is that there was no, I could not find a calculation which took into account the 5% increase in or decrease in non-revenue water. If you have ultrasonic...
Excuse me, Director Weed, are we going back to item 5.13 so that we're on the agenda?
Well, I'm
we're
talking about
under
under director's
director's
comments in a
Okay.
prior meeting that we had, and referring back to the prior board meeting, where I'm saying that we had not evaluated under the cost-benefit analysis the 5% additional revenues you would get with ultrasonic versus positive displacement. So I'm concerned that going forward with this process, the economic analysis had some challenges.
So we have 3 separate reports here. Let me see if I can get us organized. 7.1 and 7.2 were for me. 7.3 was for all directors that were Aqua. I was trying to start at the end of the board so that each person could cover all theirs, and then I will finally close with all of mine.
And I did attend the Aqua meeting, and there was a lot going on. I also had a webinar I viewed on the new laws and regulations related to the charges for the water use by individuals. And the target by 2030 will be 50 gallons per day. I don't think we'll have a problem with that as a district because of the large number of population we have that are living in condos and apartments, and therefore we should be okay. But the reporting requirements are such that accurate information on water use will be helpful.
That's all reports?
That'll cover it.
All right, so I went to the Aqua conference. I will try to make this short, sorry. So I went to a session on portable water reuse, either direct or indirect potable, and there I received an update on regulations. They're actually getting in more details, down to detailed sampling requirements. And in the same session, we also heard from the GM from Orange County Water District, Las Virgenes, and City of Ventura on their water reuse project. Actually, the City of Ventura is looking at direct potable reuse. I found that to be very interesting. And they have some great lessons, but I think the bottom line is communication with customers seems to be the highest priority item for everybody. I also went to a session on understanding infrastructure financing, since that is of interest to us. And there's a pro and cons on financing from state and federal governments, such as the SURF loans. And then there's the private financing, debt collection, well, debt authorization, sorry. So, lesson learned, it seems like for an agency like ours, federal and state funding might be the most advantageous for us. The downside is that there's a lot of paperwork. So there will be staff hours and involvement required. Since I'm about to lose my voice, I'll just wrap up by saying I also sit in a session on SB 998, which is the water shutoff. Interesting, lots of legal implications and cost implications for us. including potential perpetuating implications, is something that I think we should watch. That's it.
Director Akbari.
So I also went to the Aqua Conference in San Diego. The first day spent it attending some of the committee meetings, and then on Wednesday I also got to sit in on the Region 5 meeting. I guess the couple of things, I was also on the financing infrastructure session with Director Huang. I think the big thing that came out of one of the statewide issue forums was that the water tax is definitely going to come back, and it's more a question of when than if at this point. And another session that I got to sit on was moderated by, or not moderated by, but had our very own Jonathan Wunderlich as one of the panelists, as well as Sanjay Gore, and I thought that was a great session. So great job, Jonathan.
Turn.
I too went to the water conference. I went to their program on regulating the urban water system leak loss, and I'm not sure what I came out of that one with. What I did come out with is that it seems that they've passed the bill, but they have no idea how they're going to do this. And they've passed it over now, I think it was to the state board. And so everything's on the table. There are no specifics. At least there was nothing mentioned at the conference in that session I was in. So I don't know what influence we could have on that, but it seems to me, I think KUA certainly will have an influence, I hope. But from what I could determine, they sort of said, okay, we passed it, now you implement it. So I think everything's on the table. That was an interesting session. Perhaps it was because I wasn't feeling good. Maybe I couldn't decipher what they were coming up with, but I couldn't, it seemed to me like it's pretty much an open book at this point. There is no plan. I went to the other session I'm looking at here is the pathway to the voluntary agreements and the Bay Delta local solutions. It was okay. I mean, we've kind of learned a lot of that ourselves, and that working with the regulators tends to help. One thing I found there was very interesting is Washington State and how involved the state is in their process. It doesn't seem to be the same effect of California, where it's you guys deal with it. Up there, their state actually gets involved and will help. Where here, it's like, okay, you guys, you're gonna pay for it. I wish I had my notes. I realized I brought the wrong book, but I remember very well the state guy and the difference. There was a difference in how they do business. But reasonably valuable session. I was not blown away by any of the lunch speakers. A lot of talk about what's going to happen, what isn't going to happen. I went to Hansto, and it was interesting to hear what their perception is. And my perception is gridlock. We'll see. It all depends on which side they decide to work together. Yeah.
My turn. Any other comments on other business?
Oh, one more comment. Maybe this is the time to say it. Water harness report. Maybe Union Cities is going to go up now, but nicely done again. I have to comment on that. It really is. You guys have done a terrific job over there.
Thank you.
On a side note to our water situation, I was at the Newark Rotary luncheon with Laura Heides, where she was presenting, and excellent presentation, as usual. But you noted, with interest for everybody there, that we're doing a lot of retrofit at the desal plant. And it's interesting how, in talking to people, they detect the change in the water that they're getting. And Laura was explaining the difference between what's coming out of the desal plant and what's in the distribution system right now. So it's, you know, customers are sensitive to what's out there. All right, so let me go down and see if I can do this quickly here. 7.1, I was at the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority meeting last month on September 15th, and I was there with Stephen N. A large part of the meeting was devoted to a closed-door session, which was dealing with things I'm not permitted to talk about here, but it was a very lengthy session. Generally talking about where all of the options for the Delta Finance Authority, now that they were turned down for the EPA $1.8 billion loan. So we were looking at all of the options that are available at this point. There were a number of legal issues that were presented. If I recall correctly, Mr. Inn, we have a number of lawsuits immediately, right off the bat. You know, people wanting to sue the Finance Authority at the same time they're suing the Design and Construction Authority. So we were given an update on that. Can't comment on those lawsuits. And then in open session, we were dealing with adopting our bylaws, organizational activities, putting out an RFP for legal counsel, and putting out an RFP for future bond counsel as well. So the RFP had a deadline of, I think it was December 8th, 5th, something like that. And we've already received several responses. So the next meeting of the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority is tomorrow up in Sacramento. Mr. Wunderlich and I will be up there. And we will go to the next step of trying to move this new state organization off the ground. Mr. Shaver covered a little bit of some of what was talked about in the meeting in open session. One was the compromise agreements that are necessary on the Tuolumne, Stanislaus, and Merced rivers. There's a lot of pressure from the governor, outgoing governor, incoming governor, to try and get people to come to compromises. And then we were given an update on the validation actions that are going through DWR. And I asked a question there. I got a little bit of a laugh out of the audience, a chuckle, because we were told that this is going to take 5 years to resolve in court. And I asked, is there any other way of, an express method of going through the courts, because this is a high priority? And I was told, absolutely not. So this is the beginning of a 5-year court battle. We've got multiple battles coming up. All right, moving on to I attended the Aqua Business Development Committee that I'm appointed to afterward over at the Aqua offices. And we had a very good meeting. We've got a lot of creative people on that business development group. And we had set out with a business plan earlier this year to expand the revenues of Aqua and look at a lot of new initiatives. All are underway, and we're on target to meet some benchmarks that were quite a bit above where Aqua was in past years. So a report will probably be going out in the Aqua newsletter at some point. And I will say this, I'm on 3 committees. The State Water Management Committee, which is composed of 40 people, the Local Legislative Committee, which is about 2 dozen, and our Business Development Committee is about a dozen, 14 people. The smaller the committee gets, the more work we get done. The largest committee, the State Water Management Committee, is almost unwieldy, having 40 people on there. So I will segue into reporting on that, because at Aqua, on the first day, I was actively involved with that committee, the State Water Management Committee. We had close to all 40 members there, and I counted about 60 in attendance that were observers, so very well attended. And I will just say this for anyone who's interested in attending this meeting. In 2 hours, and maybe 3 because you're talking to other people before and afterward, you get the most comprehensive look at California water from top to bottom in one session. And it's incredible how quickly they move through things. And I've said this before, you got to be on the top of your toes here in this meeting, because you're moving from one piece of legislation to another subject, and if you don't know your bill, you can very easily embarrass yourself in front of the whole crowd. So that was a very good session from top to bottom. I'm on 7.3 on the Aqua session. So as I usually do, I try to go to sessions where I can get something practical that I can bring back to the district. The first was, since we're dealing with AMI, I went to the Badger presentation on new metering technology dealing with pressure and temperature sensors, which are not yet on the market, but they're coming onto the market. So we were given slide presentation and a product demo of different types of products that are coming to market. While Badger was the one making the presentation, other vendors were there as well to answer questions in that session. And so it's very interesting that if we were to go ahead and adopt, let's say, ultrasound meters, we will have these forthcoming technologies on pressure and temperature that will help us even more. So that was very interesting. I attended with Steve Peterson the first of the energy presentations, which was more of a global level presentation. I attended all 3 that day. I went from the first one, which had about 100 people, 120, to the second one, which was about 50, and by the time I was at the third one in the afternoon, we were down to about 2 dozen. But they kept getting better as we got more focused and we were able to go into case studies by the third session. And I attended those 3 energy sessions on energy savings and how it applies to the water industry and what all the opportunities are, because we're going to have some upcoming workshop sessions on the proposal I made to look for where to cut back on our energy expenses. And there were a lot of good examples coming in from other water districts and others that use large amounts of water in industry, the University of California, San Diego, hospitals. So that was very beneficial. I'm hoping to bring a lot of that information to our forthcoming workshop on the matter. Lastly, I attended the the session on, it was the Region 5 session on internships and apprenticeships. And it was primarily the case studies of East Bay Mud and Santa Clara Valley Water District, with input from other Region 5 water districts, what their experiences have been. They had a panel, and we had a lot of our Region 5 board members there. Without going into a lot of detail, what was basically discussed was all the trials and efforts, the pros and cons, what works, what doesn't work, where people have found real value, where they've wasted money. So we got to hear from all different perspectives, from failure to some surprising success stories. But in each case where we had a success story, it was extremely well focused. So hopefully I can bring that up in some future committee meetings. And it was good to have that discussion with just our Region 5 folks. There were other people from other regions that came in wanting to learn, but when we are already familiar with the other agencies, it helped to for everybody to talk these things through. And the session lasted much longer than was on the calendar because everybody knew each other, and everybody wanted to ask questions afterward, and so it was really good to go to. And I attended this session because Director Akbari had made a proposal to take a look at some outreach to high school and college folks, and I wanted to go in and really ask myself, what's the business case? What works? What doesn't? Where's their opportunity that would not cost a lot of money? So I have proposed to Director Akbari that perhaps we put our minds together and make a proposal back to a committee with some ideas that we might explore. And so that is it. Oh, one last thing. I got a 3-hour tour of the Tesla plant yesterday. We had a Fremont Chamber of Commerce, our Government Affairs Committee meets once a month, and we had set up a couple of field trips. One was up to Calaveras Reservoir to see the new dam in, I believe, August. And yesterday was our Tesla tour. The gentleman who is the Government Affairs officer for Tesla is on our committee. And so we get a special insight from him every month on what is really going on the inside of Tesla. I feel like I'm getting the insider's stock tip sometimes. So I will not take advantage of that, but you do learn a lot of information that is not on the street as much as you read things. And employees were very excited at the plant yesterday because, you know, the stock is near an all-time high. The tour was excellent. I went through that factory as a young kid when I was in the Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts actually. It was the General Motors plant. I went through it again in high school. I went through it again when it was NUMMI. And I'll tell you, it is just an absolutely phenomenal experience to go through this factory today and remember what it was like, you know, decades ago, because it's just completely robotics in there. And I asked the question about some of the facilities, like the big white box that they recently built without windows and things like that. Well, in the building, they have some of the most unique, singular robots that were just built for Tesla, including the world's largest robot. It's 10 stories tall, 3 in the ground and 7 above ground. And it is the world's largest stamping press for aluminum to make body parts, things like that. And it was spitting them out at 1 every 6 seconds. Amazing. And they were telling us how long it used to take factory workers to do the same thing years ago. So if you ever get a chance, it's one cool factory to go through. All right, there is no closed session for tonight. And I would like to hand off the gavel to the incoming president of the board. But first, I just want to say thank you to everybody on this board for giving me the opportunity. I was delighted to serve. I think I was a little bit better than I was the first time around. I'm still learning. And I want to thank the staff, and I want to thank everybody who helped on the District of Distinction Award, because each of us as a board president gets to work on one board activity if they wish. And that was my goal. So I leave the role with feeling a lot of satisfaction and a level of accomplishment, and not personal accomplishment, but team accomplishment from the board, the staff, everybody that works here at the district. And so it is with a lot of pleasure that I am going to hand off the historic gavel to the incoming president, Director Gunther.
I want it.
It comes with a lot of responsibility.
Hand it off, handle first.
Greatly appreciate it, and I'll keep my comments very short because I would love to end this meeting by 10 o'clock. So I think you've done a wonderful job. Thank you so much. And hopefully I can do as well. And with that, meeting adjourned.
Director Gunther.